welcome everyone and good afternoon. I'm Megan Mance with the Homeland Security and Defense Forum, and we are so excited to have you join us for our symposium, The Evolution of Government Cloud, What Comes Next? And I want to extend a welcome to both our in-studio audience here today at the AT&T Forum in Washington, D.C., as well as to our virtual audience. And I want to thank our event partners for making this possible, Dell Technologies, Intel, Oracle, and Red Hat. And just a couple of quick items for your consideration. Please visit our event landing page throughout today's program. There you'll find our agenda, speaker bios, and virtual exhibit hall. And we provided that link in the Zoom chat. And if you're joining us in person, feel free to scan the QR code in front of you. And for today's event, we do want to make this an interactive experience. So we encourage you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask questions throughout the event. And we'll also be taking questions from our live audience as well. So please don't be shy. And we have a tremendous program in store for you today. So let's jump right in. I have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Chris Wright. He serves as Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President for Global Engineering at Red Hat. He leads a team that guides Red Hat's vision for technology, including elements such as engineering, product security, customer experience, and technology incubation. And Chris is a software engineer by trade and has over 25 years experience. And he's very passionate about open source software as the foundation for next generation IT systems. So Chris, we're really looking forward to your keynote. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Megan. And just thanks for having me today. What a privilege to be able to speak with you all on maybe some topics that are near and dear to my heart, and hopefully I can make them near and dear to your heart. That's part of my goal here. And I wanted to share what I'm hearing as I have the privilege to travel really globally and speak with a broad customer base. Talking about technology, certainly where Red Hat sees open source fitting into this picture of the evolution of technology. So just as a quick starting point, for those of you who don't know Red Hat, I wanted to share a couple of points about who we are, about the company. First, we are the world's #1 provider of open source commercial IT products and solutions. And that's something we are very proud of because we stand out in a space that historically was questioned. How real is this? And today it's really gone mainstream. So as a result, we are roughly 20,000 employees, and we're proud to say that 90% of the Fortune 500 use our products. And everything that we do starts in the open source communities and what we call upstream. Now, this approach is very unique in the software industry, and we live in these two worlds, the world of open source software development, sometimes I refer to it a bit as the Wild West, and then the world of business, where we apply software to help run businesses. And that straddling of those two worlds is really a core of the value that we bring to our customers. And living in these two worlds, I'm amazed at how much open source has evolved and impacted companies globally. Our strategic focus is on building out a hybrid cloud vision, which transitions from traditional on-premises data centers to a public cloud across multiple public clouds, and increasingly and excitingly out to the edge, helping customers really modernize and take advantage of cloud-native capabilities and building new applications that can fit either your business goals or your mission to get you there as quickly as possible. I'd also like to point out, relevant probably more to this audience, Red Hat is in all 16 cabinet-level agencies, and 50 states, across the U.S. are using our products. So we understand not just the enterprise business, but also government needs, which I think is important when you look at things like compliance and certification, and certainly here talking about things like security. So as I said, I get to talk to customers all the time. And I wanted to share with you these themes that I hear very consistently. The first is maybe a little trite. All companies, all agencies are becoming software focused. You build your mission, you build your value out of software. You're technology focused. A little trite because there's a lot of details under there that I think really matter, but this is very consistent. We hear this focus on building technology or building software with technology as the underpinnings. And as a software company, we relate well to that. We deliver software, we do that all day long. And the way I like to think of it is, well, we're a software factory. So how can we help our customers become a software factory? Time to value, time to mission, these are really important things for our customers. And the tool set and the processes and cultural changes that go along with the tool set are critical to success. The other kind of trite or possibly buzzword-focused area is being data-driven. So you'll hear this all the time. I'll dig into it a little bit more. Again, easier said than done. There's a lot of work under the hood of what it means to become a data-driven business. So I think there's some interesting analogies between software development and data science that we can draw from and learn from across these two disciplines, and even look at ways that we can connect them together. Globally, customers are looking at managing risk and ensuring compliance. And risk here is largely focused around the supply chain and security risks. Nobody wants to be on the front page of a business journal, and looking at how you manage your risk profile in the context of moving quickly is a meaningful challenge. And then finally, we deal with large customers that have a global footprint. How can you be operationally resilient around the globe, leveraging different types of infrastructure, which I think is already showing itself in the form of the Operational Resilience Act, DORA, in the EU, requiring some ability to move applications from one cloud to another cloud in a short period of time. When you think about banking being part of the national economy, becomes a really big concern. And when you think about edge computing, providing that resiliency, highly distributed, is a big challenge for customers. So I just wanted to dig into these a little bit more in detail. So first I'll focus on that sort of how do we build and deliver software. I think number one is accelerating the ability to quickly deliver software into production and doing that responsibly. So there's lots of tools out there, and especially in the open source world where technology moves quickly, how can you deliver those tools to your developers that are focused on a specific outcome without sacrificing your compliance, your risk profile, and think about delivering the value that's important to you as a business, or delivering on your mission. In there's a question around operational efficiency. Many of these customers that I work with have a long history of building software or consuming software in some way, shape, or form. I like to joke that the enterprise is basically an archaeological spelunking experience of finding all software that's ever been produced. So how do you modernize, and what do you modernize? When is it appropriate to actually modernize an application, or just leave it in place and slowly build around it? And certainly delivering applications to multiple clouds is a challenge. So in there, we take a view of building some commonality. You get developer efficiency by targeting a common platform. You get operational efficiency by targeting a common platform. We look at supporting our customers by building a common CI pipeline and delivering software independent of the underlying infrastructure, whether it's on premises, whether it's in a cloud, to that common platform using these common procedures so that different development teams can share best practices. And of course, from a security policy perspective, you can provide a common way of building policy declaration and then policy enforcement. Now, the struggle to be data-driven is interesting in the sense that many data science projects fail. A couple of different analysts and some experts in the space cite numbers around 80% of data science experiments failing. And then when you take that and connect it to all the data that we're producing. By 2025, we're expected to have 175 zettabytes of data. 70% of that data is dropping on the floor. So between failed experiments and not capturing all the data, there's a lot of improvement that we can manage in this space. I like to think about this as we've understood how to lifecycle manage applications. We know source code, we know building binary artifacts, we know testing and integration and delivering into production. That's a CI pipeline. We understand revision control, we know how to update and roll back, and all of these things that we've learned over decades. Where is that discipline in data science? And how do we create an AI pipeline? How do we deliver the notion of data as source and a trained model as a binary artifact with a life cycle around it? And as you do, the effective configuration changes in application, parameter tweaking in data science, affecting the outcomes, predictability outcomes, predictive nature of the model, how do we capture that and know when we're making forward progress and need to, or regressing and need to back out and update our model? So we think of this as data is becoming a central actor. And our experience in building platforms that support application development, we want to make sure that we can support data science and the workloads that run associated with data science on our platform. And in the end, bring them together. As we see intelligent applications that take advantage of models, maybe even models surfaced with the REST API that can be directly integrated into applications as a key part of building value. And some of our partners in the defense space think of this very mission-focused on models having really a core part of the mission deployment in the inference engine. And speaking of inference, when you're doing scale-out model training, and then delivery, deployment of a model to, say, even an edge device, we have to look at the underlying hardware. So as an operating system company and personally as a developer in the operating system space, I love the fact that hardware is evolving quickly, and hardware is evolving to meet the needs of applications and things like data and AI-based workloads. So bringing that together in a way that doesn't require data scientists to become experts in the underlying hardware or in the tool chain surrounding that, which is developed in open source communities and moving forward very rapidly, we can deliver a kind of a prescriptive AI pipeline focused ML ops type of experience, targeting a common platform and bringing this world of application development and data science closer together. All right, so what about software supply chain security? An uncomfortable and staggering statistic is in the last year, there's been a 650% increase in year-to-year attacks on the software supply chain. That's concerning, and some of that happens directly in open source communities. I think an example like Log4j was a great wake-up call for the industry to question not is open source itself safe, but when you take software and put it into production, where did the software come from and where is it running in production? And how do you maintain that visibility? So we think of this in terms of a software supply chain. We have been working in open source communities to build new tools to manage the software supply chain and trying to create the shift left or DevSecOps tool chain to support software developers not needing to become security experts. I have a security background. I can tell you confidently, it's not realistic to expect the entire software development population to become security experts. We can infuse security expertise into a pipeline through recommendations in the developer's environment in an IDE, through to static analysis, through to dynamic fuzz testing, cryptographic signatures as you build artifacts and then validate those signatures as you deploy artifacts so that you kind of create this whole trust environment from the beginning of the software supply chain to delivery into production and manage visibility into where you're delivering software into production so you're not surprised when there's a vulnerability that we didn't know about and you don't actually know where that software is running. Looking at this from the perspective of the full stack, inclusive of hardware. So when you're delivering software and inference engines on the edge of your world, and the edge means different things to different people, edge is often exposed to the public. It's not within the four walls of a data center or in a public cloud. So we need to be able to understand the trust profile of the entire software stack, inclusive of hardware, as you boot up and deliver changes to these edge environments. So the types of tooling that we're focused on in communities and in our products is enabling that end-to-end solution around software supply chain and give software developers quick visibility into where they're pulling in known vulnerabilities or potentially producing code that has patterns that are known to be buggy. Finally, about operational resilience. The world is distributed, and when you really factor in something like edge computing, it cements the notion that hybrid is the reality. Hybrid meaning delivering application content to multiple different infrastructure footprints. We're building the capabilities to show the policy and the sort of the declarative language of policy that you want to manage those applications. And when you use a common infrastructure or a common platform underneath the applications, you can enforce that policy consistently, regardless of where it's deployed. To me, this is a critical part of flexibility and choice for our customer base as you're looking at how you deliver quickly and manage that operational efficiency, but also share best practices within teams that are responsible for different parts of the application portfolio to build resilience and resilient practices into your into the operations teams that are responsible for each of the applications. We actually build capabilities that are trying to create what I would call an autonomous system, or in my early days of research, we worked on a DARPA grant called Autonomics, which is building autonomic systems. There's a holy grail there that we won't fully realize, but building the tools that can do observation through telemetry and build execution plans to remediate issues that you see in your applications or in your infrastructure, that's where we're putting our investment, and we know over time we'll just continually improve the automation and increase the autonomy of systems. Finally, I'd just like to zero in on how we operate across industries. So I mentioned we're across the Fortune 500 and in many agencies. Here is an example of how we've worked with an ecosystem to fully transform an industry. This industry is a telecommunications industry. In fact, a lot of interest between the ecosystem and the US government on producing innovation in the 5G space from both a security perspective and a business perspective. Here, we help create a common technology base, whether it's Linux or Kubernetes, for the industry to focus on and enable the entire industry to move together through this collaborative model. And first, this was about introducing virtualization into networks and 4G and slowly moving to containerization and cloud-native principles in 5G. 5G becomes this connection point to the edge. And when we look at what we're doing in the edge space, you can see hardware gets more and more interesting. We have different types of architectures. We have new accelerators, IPUs and DPUs that can build these distributed systems that are low power, high performance, and ultimately look at that same disruptive model across different industries that can rally together around common technology building blocks to fundamentally move us forward. And to me, this is really exciting, and I see this happening most at the edge, where the edge use cases are very industry vertically focused. And I listed here a number of spaces where we're invested, including bringing functional safety into vehicles, relevant for both automobiles, but also UAVs, and a whole set of industry-focused areas on the edge that bring data as that central actor, data that we're collecting through all the telemetry, that's how we're observing the real world and then making real-time changes to behavior so that we can best deliver on the mission or realize greatest revenue growth for business use cases. So hopefully that just gives you a taste of what we're up to and where we see these interesting sort of conversations happening in our customer communities. And what I really love to do, if we have time, is hear from you where that resonates, where you see challenges, maybe even some experiences you have in tackling those challenges. And really thank you for the time today.
Great, thank you for that keynote, Chris. Really appreciate it. And happy to open it up to our in-person audience here if you have any questions. So feel free to raise a quick hand. But I'm going to get started with just a couple of questions we received from our virtual audience as well. Right. And you had talked about creating operationally resilient systems, and there were just additional questions about what are you hearing from your customers as some of the greatest challenges to build resilient systems upon hybrid or multi-cloud infrastructure? If there's just a couple of quick anecdotes you could share.
There's a few key challenges. Number one is there's a skills challenge across our customer base. So bringing the skills up to modern tools is a real challenge. Number two, you can only improve what you're measuring, so observability is a really important topic. Telemetry, understanding what's happening in systems is challenging, and in the end, we're building more and more complicated systems. So we need to be able to ensure we don't overly complicate things. You could talk about microservices, and if you break something down into 2 fine-grained small pieces and connect it all back together, you have a very complex system. So finding the right level of granularity it is really important to manage some of that complexity. And again, with that complexity that we're creating, we need to build automation tools around that. And so part of it is the observability, part of it is the skill set, part of it is sort of managing complexity. And where you can, if you look at what a hyperscaler does very effectively, why they operate at such scale with such efficiency, it's having these sort of large-scale, consistent building blocks. There's not a lot of heterogeneity within a hyperscaler infrastructure. So that's a type of simplification while managing this big, complex space. And again, from our point of view, a common platform is a way to bring together that big common building block, and then you can build best practices and the automation and telemetry around that, which is helping the customers move faster rather than being stuck in, sort of managing sprawling complexity.
Sure. I appreciate that answer. Anyone with a question here? I have a couple more. So we are here in Washington, D.C., so I would be remiss to ask something that's related to government, but some in our audience were curious, just from a Red Hat corporate level even, how do you view the NIST cyber framework in terms of developing your own cyber strategy, if that's something of importance, and I guess as well as following what things like the Office of Management and Budget are doing around zero trust?
2 awesome topics. So we're definitely very connected to the NIST framework. I'd say there's a number of different initiatives that are sort of converging. There's a connection between the cybersecurity work in NIST framework and then OpenSSF as a open source world looking at the software supply chain of open source software. So that is how we can identify the most critical components that we deliver out of open source, characterize the risk associated with those software components, and then manage the delivery of that software from the open source community through the ecosystem, which includes things like a software bill of materials, so that we start to know where our software is being deployed, and understanding threat models, which I think is a really interesting perspective, which is a little newer to not the security community, but the development community and certainly open source communities. So to me, there's a number of spaces that are of interest. We directly connect from a NIST point of view, and we're trying to bring in the perspective of the broader community to maintain that shared vision.
Great, that's great to know. And then I think one other topic that kind of stood out to our virtual audience, we're talking a lot about artificial intelligence, and you had mentioned that marrying data and AI without data scientists is something that is possible and something that you're looking at Red Hat. Just curious what other sort of workforce requirements would come into play there, and as well as IT requirements, and talking about that.
Well, there's an IT infrastructure that supports any data science activity. And that's where we've tried to bring this commonality to let the IT operations teams build a platform that can support both application delivery as well as data science as data science as an activity. Data scientists are really rare and expensive assets in a company. And part of our focus is enabling data scientists to really focus on the data science and not the tool chain development or maintenance. And in that context, one, share and collaborate with each other across a common platform, so maybe have shared models and even influence each other in how you do model development. But also, there's data science as a discipline is a highly skilled discipline. Taking a model and integrating that into an application is something that we can do with application developers. So it's not necessarily making application developers data scientists, but bringing those two disciplines together in a way that leverages the skills of each and doesn't, sort of distract one skill set and focusing on the wrong discipline, if you will. So that's really how we're trying to focus on commonality, letting the IT teams build the same build common infrastructure, and then create collaboration across data scientists and application developers so that we can work together and build against those business outcomes, which I think are missing in many of the data science experiments, which is often why they fail.
Okay. I just want to again thank Chris Wright for that great presentation. We certainly appreciate it. And he did a great job setting the stage around cloud and what we need to be thinking about, and got us off to a great start today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And just as a quick reminder for the folks who are here in person today, we are going to be hosting a reception after our program here wraps up. It's going to be just down the hall, so I encourage all of you to stick around for that. And now I'd like to welcome up Luke McCormack, Matt Gilkenson, and Kevin Fiftal for our next panel discussion. Mr. Matt Gilkenson serves as Director of the Innovation Task Force at the Transportation Security Administration and is also serving as the Acting Executive Director for Capability Management and Innovation. Mr. Kevin Fiftal is the Managing Director for Cloud at Intel Public Sector. And moderating for us today is Mr. Luke McCormack, former CIO at the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice and a member of our HSDF Senior Advisory Committee. We look forward to your discussion, gentlemen. Please come up and have a seat.
I was going to start out by doing what I often start out with, which is thanking all of you in this room for everything that you do every day. Certainly all the folks that are in federal service, that have been in federal service, and those that are helping the folks in federal service. And I'm going to give you my pitch on federal service. If you haven't tried that, I encourage all of you to give it a shot, because it tastes great, and you'll never regret it. It's one of the most proudest things you'll ever do. And I can tell you that there's no doubt that this gentleman here from TSA and Sonny from CBP and the folks from FEMA, et cetera, need the talent, right? They're always looking for more talent because the mission continues to increase. So that's my plea to all of you to consider federal service, because you won't regret it. With that, we're going to start off here with two distinguished gentlemen. Matt Gilkenson, he's the Acting Executive Director for Capability Management and Innovation at Transportation Security Administration. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
All right, and then your permanent role is?
Director of Innovation Task Force.
Okay, and we'll get you to explain that in a minute.
Yeah.
And Kevin Fiftal, who's the Managing Director for Cloud Intel Public Sector. We're talking about hybrid cloud. We're talking about multi-cloud. We're going to talk about a couple of other things as well. Kevin, I thought we'd start with you. Sure. And ask you just a baseline as we get into this conversation. Just for the audience, not to offend anybody, just give us a one-on-one definition of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. What is that, just so we're on the same page there?
Sure. So my role at Intel is that essentially I'm in front of the departments and agencies that you spoke about, federal agencies, state and local agencies, every day, 3, 4, 5 meetings. And everyone appears to have a different definition on this. So I always go back to 2011 when Tim Grants and Peter Mell defined this, because they defined it for the U.S. government. in the document on cloud computing. And cloud computing, of course, is a ubiquitous network making up servers and network and storage and everything. Hybrid cloud to us, and within that document, is at least two systems. It may be a private cloud. We're working with a lot of private clouds right now, where a traditional OEM like Dell is the basis of that. We're finding hybrid clouds that are stack type of basis that is between the on-prem and the regular public cloud. And we're just seeing a lot of data centers in private cloud talking now to the major hyperscalers, the CSP, as far as that's concerned. Multi-cloud to us, we define multi-cloud as multiple hyperscalers or multiple CSPs. It's our biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis right now. I go very deep as far as security when we're talking about that, but multi-cloud is CSPs, hyperscalers, hybrids, two clouds talking to each other in that fashion.
All right, fantastic. And how about we're going to sprinkle in a little zero trust here, undoubtedly, in this conversation. So can you take a crack at Zero Trust 101?
So zero trust. What do we look at that for?
Basic definition, so that we're all on the same
NIST
page.
SP, what was it, 800-207? Zero trust, of course, is a paradigm, a framework of trust and verify. What had been a castle, a moat, high walls is now identity access. It's made up of a series of components that you need to trust and verify as far as your entire IT system is. The challenge, of course, in zero trust is take it across what Chris was just talking about, take it across your entire network. And that's where all our challenges right now are, Luke.
Yeah, and I failed to state the last piece of that, which I normally do, and that's the architecture, right? It's an architecture, and I think that's really important. Matt, I said a mouthful when I was describing your role or announcing your role. Give us a little bit more on what is that role that you're in now, and why is that important to TSA?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. And
our pleasure.
Most everybody, I think, is probably familiar with TSA. We're the most forward-facing federal agency. We typically have the opportunity to interact with everybody who's traveling. We have 440 federalized airports, for the numbers, kind of 2 million passengers a day, or over 750 million passengers that are traveling every day, or every year, excuse me. And in that, we vet 50,000 security officers are in the process of helping us do that. So you have an idea of the size and scale of the agency, largest kind of transportation security enterprise in the world. The role that I have is capability management, and innovation is a role that covers the lead business authority for the agency. So we have a set of capability managers that we stood up about 4 or 5 years ago to pivot TSA from talking about technology specifically that's performing the screening functions to talking about the capability areas that we need to have access to perform those functions. Meaning, examples, canines, on-person screening, carry-on property screening, check baggage, counter UAS, detect, track, and identify. Each of those capability areas has a manager that's looking at the full life cycle of material and non-material solutions. And within that, we're defining the research and development aspects of kind of what capability we need to develop to be able to deliver and enhance that mission, passenger experience, and security effectiveness. And so, dovetailing to that, nexus back to the topic of the day, we can't do that at this point. I think we've reached a point where the technology that we have operating in a disconnected environment cannot get us more capability without the connectivity. So our CIO, Yemi, asked me to come and cover for him because he's traveling. But in that process, in that conversation, we're actively working to try and drive that connectivity of the equipment so that we can then take it to the next level of capacity and capability by leveraging all the power that the cloud, the software aspects can bring to us.
Yeah, no question, and I'm sure we'll get into this once you're sort of connected back to some of these capabilities. All of a sudden, you have all this massive compute, this AI, this ML, et cetera. Kevin, let me bounce back over to you and talk about, let's talk about Intel's journey in regards to implementing a multi-cloud, a hybrid cloud. Maybe you're doing both, maybe you're doing one or the other. I would suspect you're doing it in a global environment. So
We are.
just walk us through
Right.
that journey that you all have been on.
Sure. So we actually just delivered this for 3 hours this morning, the same discussion. And then on a very confidential basis.
We've got 30 minutes.
We got 30 minutes. I better either speed up or say less.
Yeah.
So, but we can speak very deeply on this as far as a confidential basis. But we believe, as one of the world's global organizations, we can take the best practices at our IT at Intel, which we even write white papers on this. And I think it's going to come up here, some of the white papers that we've written as far as being a cloud broker internally, right?
I think they're going to publish that actually out on the shared space.
Right, they'll be publishing that. So our journey, it has been, one that we really started in 2013. And I'm going to really focus on the security side more than anything on that. But we developed it because, of course, like everything else in similar to the federal government, our sprawl of data centers was just ubiquitous. Our ability to fill those data centers with applications and workloads and solutions wasn't nearly as ubiquitous, right? We didn't find the efficiencies that we wanted within our own IT organization. So back in 2013, we started moving to private cloud. And on the security side, which is very interesting, today, where I'll go in a second, is we believe that the cloud native security elements of the major CSPs have been terrific. There's been a terrific development as far as their capabilities in the last several years. But where we started was what we knew, the on-premise. So we used all those same on-premise security tools for many years, really until 2018, we started moving much more into the cloud and using the native tools out of the three major hyperscalers. So what that created was a little bit of a clunky type of approach between on-prem and the cloud, right? So in 2018, we wrote our first paper. And if you have a chance to read it, it's great. It gave us a snapshot of what Intel had done up to that point as far as security. But it's, now, 5 years old as far as that journey is concerned. But then in 2021, we updated it. And our approach from the on-prem right through the major CSPs is that we take all the cloud native tools from the cloud service providers. We put it into not all the records or all the streams, but we put it into a Splunk with a Apache Kafka type of approach using Confluent streams, if you know some of these organizations.
Very common methods.
We bring it down into what we call our cyber intelligence panel. We create dashboards across the organizations, and we trust and verify per our InfoSec type requirements. So the journey, Luke, has been a great one from using our tools across a clunky environment in CSPs to what we believe is a pretty tight trust and verify framework as far as security is concerned, utilizing the native CSP tools.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And as you see here, we have sort of two different dimensions of the spectrum here that we're working with. So just sort of work with us as we kind of bounce back and forth, because we'll continue to sort of close these together. And Matt, I'm going to ask you, it was interesting to hear your role there about capturing these and focusing on the requirements themselves, the capabilities. What does that interface look like as you have those entities that are performing that role? At what point does that type of information, and how does it get over, and sort of what form does it get over to the CIO's organization? What's sort of the flow there? I think the audience would be interested in that.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's been and is an ongoing conversation around how we address some of that opportunity, right? We are looking for being able to partner with that IT organization to move beyond just the end user services, the day-to-day kind of office back-end appliances and things like that, to enabling the IT aspects of the equipment in the field. So those capability managers set roadmaps. They're published, they're available, everybody can see them. And within those roadmaps, we've defined advancements that we want to make to incorporate third-party capabilities, more specifically a joint declaration that we signed internationally with the idea of open architecture, bringing the concepts of what other segments of industry have already done, opening the stack, if you will, on the technology side for screening, so that we can then better leverage artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the tools that then come with the cloud environments that Kevin mentioned. It's really a direct partnership to try and make sure that the cybersecurity principles are in place, the access and the zero trust that you mentioned, Luke, are verified, so that the end users, our officers, can then leverage the components of the software.
And what is the sort of interface relationship with the transportation carriers and say the port authorities, et cetera? Because I know you all are sort of embedded into those environments. You're operating in those environments. In some cases, you're actually leveraging each other's capabilities and technologies. How does that work as far as from the capability standpoint, get imparted on those entities and partners?
To in some cases, to pull a quote from Red Hat earlier, there is data being left on the floor. Right, we're physically, partnered with those carriers, with those airports, and in many cases, it's a sneaker net conversation where we are physically at a local level sharing information and sharing data, and we're looking to transform that into a better digital environment. We can't do what we do without those airports and those airlines. That's a fact. And at the end of the day, our passengers that we're screening are the airlines and airports customers. So there's a vested stake that they have in the conversation, and so within that, it's a full public-private partnership. The screening spaces that we have, the queue layouts, those are all negotiation and collaborations with the airport authorities. Because TSA doesn't, unknown fact, doesn't own the queues. And so we depend upon
CBP's
those
in the
folks.
same situation.
Right, exactly. And so, the other piece of it that's kind of in there in terms of interface, you mentioned CBP, and I'll hit this. We have an incredible amount of opportunity that we've started to partner with CBP from a data sharing perspective, right? So every time a passenger books a flight, that name information goes into the DHS systems, and then if it's an international flight, it goes over to CBP, and if it's a flight in general that's coming over the United States or anything that TSA is regulating, all that information is flowing into Secure Flight. We perform our vetting services and vetting systems in that Secure Flight environment, and then push a vetting result back to the airlines that they then print on the boarding pass. Well, recently we've been able to deploy what we call CAT, Credential Authentication Technology. TSA's achieved something few have. Cats and dogs are getting along. We have canines in the checkpoint. We have cats in the checkpoint.
Boom.
And the Credential Authentication Technology is connected to Secure Flight. So in real time, we're able to now provide that vetting information to the fingertips of the officers performing the screening. So we're not depending upon a paper boarding pass that's printed out and hand carried around. It's a digital verification of the demographic information that's pulled from the credential that's presented. We've taken it a step further, and we're now doing one-to-one matching, biometric matching, on the CAT2 system, where the credential that's presented, by the way, there's a partnership with Apple, and we have a mobile driver's license ISO standard that we leaned in and helped create. And so we can use the mobile driver's license, we can use the American Airlines digital ID that they've launched. Other airlines are working on similar concepts, or the physical credential to pull that demographic information, validate that the ID and the credential being provided is valid, and then match that to Secure Flight for the passenger information, capture the image that's on the credential, and do a biometric match. So now we've been able to fully automate that kind of front-end process using that network connectivity that we need for the other pieces of the system. We're taking it a step further with the partnership with CBP, because they have the travel verification system, which houses existing government holdings of biometric information, primarily the State Department, passport and visa information. And they've been able to provide an API for us to be able to interface with that system, and with partnership at Delta Airlines in Detroit and in Atlanta, we're able to allow passengers to opt in to provide their passport number in pre-check, to allow that data flow to happen over to CBP, who then creates a pool of a gallery of information, gallery of images, for us to be able to do one-to-many matching. So when that passenger shows up to Delta's bag drop area, it's a biometric match, no credential required, to their Secure flight information. When they show up to screening, same thing happens. When they show up to board the plane, the same thing happens. For CBP's use case, they launched travel verification systems so they could automate the exit concept. and they could start validating beyond the manifest who's actually exited the country. And so if you're boarding an international flight, many of the airports and airlines have started equipping their gates with camera technology that allows that travel verification system to capture the exit, but also enable a biometric boarding of the aircraft.
Closer and closer to a full touchless type of experience there, which is fascinating. Way up the value chain here, which is awesome. We're gonna knock it down a couple notches, or at least one notch. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you, once you had implemented your cloud environment,
Right.
what was the most obvious thing that you all discovered as far as, capability enablement, right? What was sort of whether it's an aha moment or something that you expected or something that was very obvious and is now just, sort of table stakes?
Sure.
Beyond sort of the speeds and feeds and the security, from a capability standpoint, that you realize, wow, we didn't expect this, or we did expect this, and we're so glad it's here because I don't know how we live without it.
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple things. First, on capabilities, just timing, right? So we'll start from when the initial request came in to build whatever it was, a website, a new server application, a dev environment in some ways, through our InfoSec and through our network people and our infrastructure people. 30 days later, we would respond, right? The capability, once we launched our 2018 activities, was that we were doing it in 1 day, right? We now do it because we have so many requests in 3 to 4 days, but we're standing up entire environments in that particular time frame. What's also interesting to us is, if you all have worked in a true IT environment, the IT people like to grade everything as far as gold and silver and bronze. So every group that we speak with internally, they want the gold standard, but of course they only want to pay for the coal rather than not even the bronze. They don't want to pay for anything. So the capability that has become probably our most important one, and we believe we're cloud brokers internally. We have account managers, we have cloud brokers, we have all these other things, is the financial ops side of our business, right? So we have gone through just a lot of different products across a multi-cloud environment as far as financial operations are concerned. And so the greatest capability we can give right now back to our users, and we represent their dollars, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, et cetera, is where they sit in their spend. That's a great capability within IT whenever we're really watching our dollars. So we can talk the features and functionalities and time that we've saved people, et cetera, the agile nature of things, et cetera. But a lot of times, the greatest capability people talk with us about is that you have delivered me the financial results in a dashboard in a very easy fashion that I can follow on any given project as we move through this. And that's the number one question we get asked daily within the U.S. federal government, and particularly at state levels, is what are the FinOps tools? What do you guys recommend as FinOps tools? And what has been your journey as far as that? And the answer is make sure that's done, right up front. Great capability without going into features and functions.
Yeah, transparency and
Yeah.
that speed of mission. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned at the beginning here that we're going to field questions as we go. So if you have any from the audience or you have any online, we're doing a little electronic mojo here. And I got a couple here. I have one that's very similar to one of the ones I was going to ask. So I'm going to sort of merge it together for you, Matt. And it's about just the type of technology that you're observing as you go through this capabilities process. At some point, you say, hey, listen, we need to be able to see through that wall. And then there's some technology that starts to emerge as far as prototyping, or et cetera. People are interested to hear about what some of the emerging technology that you are looking at, that you're getting excited about, that's sort of on the horizon here.
Yeah, sure. So, we talked about CAT and the deployment there. We as an agency, have pushed forward with a significant advancement in our detection capability with the computed tomography technology, where we're bringing 3D imaging, essentially the same as a CAT scan and the same as the explosive detection systems that have been in check baggage for a long time, shrinking those down to be able to put those into the checkpoint. We've been able to combine those with material handling systems. So essentially you have a miniature bag handling system in the checkpoint. And it's called the Checkpoint Property Screening System that really then gives us a full automation of moving the bins and screening items through the checkpoint and through screening. We're looking to challenge industry and hoping that we can get some new technology with regard to on-person screening. We've been doing the stop and pose business for a long time, and we need to get that kind of metallic, non-metallic threat detection capability for screening at speed. We want to be able to walk through. On the verge of taking all those technologies and combining them together is a prototype concept that we're hoping to be able to get out in the field in the next year or so, is self-service screening. So we with the pandemic, with COVID, we've realized people want to be able to move at their own pace. A lot of your grocery stores have already moved in that direction. There's a couple Walmart stores that don't have any manned checkout stations. It's all self-service. And so we believe that we can apply that concept in the screening environment, where we provide multiple stations, you self-serve and screen at your own speed. You have a virtual divest assistant that will help you with the divest instructions if you need them, and will be able to move you through the checkpoint. As we look at that piece of it, we've got a concept we're pushing forward with called dynamic screening, where we want to be able to capitalize on that secure flight information I talked about at the front end of the credential authentication technology, and then pass that through all the way as the passenger journey continues through the checkpoint, so that our screening algorithms and our systems can dynamically adjust up and down based on the risk of the passenger. So you wouldn't have to necessarily, if your family doesn't have pre-check, you wouldn't have to separate from them and send them through a standard lane and be pre-check in the pre-check lane. You could do it together in one lane and get the risk appropriate screening based on your risk information that we have for you at that screening opportunity. Those are a couple of the big technology advancements that we're looking for. Within that data capture system, that's a significant data processing opportunity, right? We had a demonstration we just completed out in Las Vegas in the checkpoint, and we're looking at moving that demonstration to the checked baggage area. It was a partnership between 5 different companies. It was called Storm, one of which was Dell, who I know is sponsoring this. That gave us the dynamic screening capability, and we were able to actively pass the information so an officer looking at a bag knew the risk information associated with the passenger as they were transiting through the checkpoint. We're looking at being able to do that for checked baggage as well, be able to understand kind of some of the stream of commerce to improve the detection algorithms and feed that back in to allow us to enhance the objects and materials that we're recognizing for screening.
And it certainly seems like you're going to need this sort of ultimate connected environment. We'll talk about that in a minute, sort of, on-prem there, if you will. I think it's going to be super important. All right, Kevin, let me ask you a question. We got another one from the audience here, a little bit of a twist. What are your thoughts on Executive Order 14028 on cybersecurity and Executive Order 14058 on customer experience? How do these tie into the cloud efforts?
Well, I think, first of all,
The 2 different sides of that spectrum there, but that's okay.
so if I can start with a different executive order, which is 13636, right, which is a regional cyber order, right? And what came out of that was a cybersecurity framework. I wish I had Chris's question. You say, well, how do you guys match up to that? Well, Intel, when I was the co-author, we wrote the world's first white paper on how we did the cybersecurity framework, right? And the undersecretary had asked us to do that. And I remember myself looking at our policy guy saying, that's a big task, because no one in 2015 wanted to handle that question, right? Because everyone thought you're going to be a target for something. If you showed them exactly how you've handled a framework, you become a target for that. And only 900 legal hours later, we solved the problem. We wrote the paper, more than anything else. So the new executive orders for us are, they have built upon that, Luke, more than anything, right? So if you look, at the 2 most recent ones, and I've got to tie in the CHIPS Act into that as well, they're basically a much further definition of a framework that the U.S. government wants, right? And it almost fits into what Zero Trust, whether it's the experience side, if we can just bring them together, or the standard framework. You want to be able to say that I have a plan, right? Maybe it's built into your InfoSec area, right? Maybe it's built into what we call our framework. But I love the executive order from the standpoint that it's simply defining rather than a series of functionalities. It's defining what we all really need with a basic template, if that really answers the question. The CHIPS, and this is what builds, again, what Chris from Red Hat was talking about, the CHIPS Act and HSDF ran 2 days ago a interview with Kevin Stein at NIST. And what Kevin brought up is where the basis for what Chris is going to talk about is that hardware will become the basis for a renewed focus as far as hardware-rooted trust and cybersecurity, because we can do that in CHIPS, right? It gives Chris and the Red Hat people and all the open source people the ability to build upon a very secure template so that they can put this open source together. So whatever comes up, whatever the new thing is, right? Whatever the new executive order is, Luke, maybe it's on user experience, maybe it's on something else. We're building this template in the US government better than any other government in the world on how we're gonna run our business in a secure fashion.
Yeah, it's really burned into that silicon, and it's, sort of something that is locked in, don't really need to concern yourself with it.
Right, and then you have people like Red Hat who can build on top of it, right?
Sure.
The open source.
Got another one from the field here. There's a little curveball for you, Matt. How has data sharing evolved with the move to the cloud environment? Has TSA investigated the use of distributed ledger technologies to enable broader access to data? You talked a lot about sharing data. I'm assuming you're doing that through APIs with other components, et cetera. But distributed ledgers, is that something you guys are doing?
Yeah.
You've been thinking about doing it?
So-
You're already doing it?
So let me tackle that one, but before I do, I'll back up to the previous question on customer experience, because
Sure.
I think we have a large customer base that we can talk about.
And you're all the way at the front end of that,
and
for sure.
We're
Yeah.
way ahead of it, right? So we've got a large effort afoot inside TSA to enhance the customer experience. That's across the spectrum, whether it be simply the Asst TSA concept. So our Civil Rights and Liberties and Ombudsman Office runs an Asst TSA account with our public affairs team, that if you have questions about what you can bring in your check bag or your carry-on bag, you can take a picture of it, you could tweet it to us, and we'll respond, and we'll
Hey.
tell you. Hey,
I never knew that.
hey, this is or isn't.
I'm always
gonna
hand jamming
be
on the
allowed.
website. Yes,
Right.
that's fantastic.
A couple of months ago, I got we trickled down through to capabilities management. We got a question because our office holds the procedures as well. We got a question from Congress, wanted to know if they could take a gavel through the checkpoint. And I just took the email and pivoted right over to Twitter and said, hey, what's the answer? And spit it right back out. No, don't bring a gavel to the checkpoint.
I was going to say, you got to tell us what the answer is.
No,
Yeah. Okay.
don't bring a gavel to the checkpoint.
Okay.
But that's an incredible amount of work that we're doing on Asst TSA. We've looked at incorporating some bot technology to help us answer some of the simple questions, maybe get into the object recognition capacity. So if you're looking at those images, we'll have an idea of what they're asking us about. We've also taken a step forward with our on-person screening systems. Our partners are developing low false alarm rate algorithms, which means that we don't have to pat down as many folks. Nobody wants to get touched. And with the previous technologies that TSA had, we have an avatar that tells us where a threat is on someone, which is why we do targeted pat downs. But if we can reduce that alarm rate, better detection comes from that, and we can reduce the times we have to pat somebody down. So that's an enhancement we're making on the customer experience side as well. Then the Aviation Security Advisory Committee has launched a passengers with disabilities conversation to focus in and look at how we can improve the experience for those passengers as well. TSA has a special contact team that if you have a disability, you can call us 24 hours before your flight, and we will provide a passenger services specialist that will help you through the screening process. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes folks are contacting the airlines and letting them know that they have special services needs. And so what we're trying to do at the local level is increase the data sharing, and then maybe at the enterprise level, look at how we can automate that data sharing to better be aware of passengers with disabilities and special needs through the screening process, both at the time of reservation through an airline or at the time of screening and vice versa. So, distributed ledger. I don't know that we've actually implemented any kind of distributed ledger concepts. We certainly would be open to exploring them and looking at how that value chain could come from that. With the deployment of the credential authentication technology that I mentioned earlier. We are looking at how we can do some security data exchanges with the airlines to better understand and be aware of passengers across the journey, where their touch points are with the airlines versus where their touch points are with us, so that we know who's coming inbound, if you will, from a bag check perspective, and we know who's boarded the flight and at the gate, and the airlines could be aware of who's been screened in the checkpoint. So those are data sharing things that we're looking at. And then at an aggregate level, we've also started piloting info sharing through the CAT technology of passenger arrival information, so that we can then start deriving a better passenger arrival profile to do predictive analytics for staffing and scheduling, so that we know how many lanes to have open and closed at any given time to better optimize that. Our team, the Innovation Task Force, did a demonstration back in 2017 or so of a cloud technology that allowed us to do that staffing and scheduling modeling piece, so that we knew within a 15-minute increment kind of what the predictive wait time was going to be, so that we knew when to open and close lanes. And what we found through that demonstration was a decrease in overtime, an increase in actual officer confidence in their supervisors. So it decreased their call-outs. They were taking off work less because they felt like there was a little bit more predictability in the operation.
And right amount of employee manpower, if you will, man and woman power there when you need it, I would imagine. We're getting a question here that I am actually going to punt over to Charlie for Scott and Sonny to talk about, and it's what actions are you taking around IT workforce retention, reskilling, remote work challenges? Well, I'll throw that one actually over to you. How about that?
Sure. So TSA.
Well, actually, I was talking about.
sorry.
Well, I'll do it because I think it's kind of a joint question, right? So
Yeah, I just didn't want to put that on you since you're not technically in the IT organization, but if you want to talk about your organization, please. I mean, I think everyone's
I'll start, then I'll-
interested.
then I'll pass it over.
I just gave a plea for public service, so
Yeah.
how about it?
Yeah. So in our cloud broker program, what we did is we originally took very experienced people in our organization that had a kind of a jack of all trades, had network experience, had user experience, had security background, et cetera, and they started to lead our cloud broker program. So very senior IT, well paid, been with Intel a long period of time. But in order to bring in new cloud people, we brought in a series of junior employees to bring them through the organization so they too could become a cloud broker. And our experience was great because while they brought a lot of energy, as soon as we ended up training them, they went somewhere else, right? So we lost those people. And we did the same thing for the next year. We did the same thing by 2016. We had learned our lesson. We started hiring much higher end people as far as that's concerned. Now the challenges, particularly in a multi-cloud environment, there's very few people have certifications across all three clouds, and the nuances are there, right?
And not all, right. I think a lot of these agencies, a lot of these CIOs have described that to me, that, hey, we have a mastery in this cloud environment.
Right.
And there's some nuances over there that we have to understand in the next cloud environment.
Right. And those, to us, at least as a practitioner, and I work with our practitioners every day, are significant. So what we do instead, we look for at least the senior people we hire, they have a great proficiency in at least one of those cloud service environments, whether it be AWS as an example, right? And then we simply have 2 other people or 3 other people in GCP, and then we have 4 other people as Azure. So while there's the cross-breeding in many ways, we do had to increase the amount of people we had there, Luke, as far as this is concerned, but we no longer hire junior people in that role. We believe that it's the most key area of our agile growth, and the answer is we're not going to do it with junior people anymore. Just spoke about it this morning.
While I'm not in the IT organization and I can't speak to necessarily the specifics of how Yemi and team are recruiting and retaining the IT workforce, I can talk a little bit writ large as the agency. Our administrator, you may know, has recently been reconfirmed to another 5-year term.
Yep.
He's been really, really closely working with the Hill to advance a concept of pay equity. So when TSA stood up, it stood up on a shared value pay system. It wasn't the GS pay scale. And so our officers aren't paid in parity with the rest of the GS, the general schedule of the federal government. And so the administrator has been advocating, and I think Congress has gotten traction to be able to support the idea of a broad across the workforce pay increase. let's face it, hiring is difficult for everyone, no matter what industry you're in, right? Fortunately for us, TSA's economists did a fantastic job of projecting our return to travel, so we didn't get stuck in some of the same situations that the airlines have with regard to their workforce. But at the officer level, that pay equity should be able to help us with some of the retention associated with the attrition, which may help us maintain some balance of staff. From a headquarters perspective, we're operating in a hybrid work environment. Folks are really only required at headquarters to come in twice a pay period, and they're looking at now, a remote work process where they can file for and be granted the ability to remote work, which will then widen our net for the workforce in the public sector.
So we have 1 minute to do it. One more question. Okay, so let's take one from the field. There is a question in here about international travel and pre-screening, OCONUS. I think that sounds more like pre-check. And again, I'm going to throw that one over to Charlie and let them answer that. Any questions from the audience here live? Somebody's got to have a question.
If there isn't, I can talk about the international one-stop concepts that we're working on.
Please. Oh, wait, we got one here.
Good.
As a frequent traveler, I have a question that I'm curious on the technology side.
Wait, this is the red hat guy. Just announce who
Chris Wright,
just
Red
so
Hat.
for folks
Yeah.
that can't see.
Yeah, you bet. Chris Wright, Red Hat. I was curious, the public-private partnership that you described, how much of that is supported at the technology level? And I loved your SneakerNet example, and I'm sort of picturing using a private service as part of the boarding and check process. I imagine there's got to be some technology challenges in maybe the APIs that are shared between the private side and the public side. So I was curious, what is that? And it can't all be SneakerNet.
And if I could, because we're gonna sort of I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit because I know we have to close it out. As you're answering that, give us sort of a picture of the future. If we did have that entire environment connected, right, in anticipation of that's the ultimate desire, what is the expected experience going to be at that point? But let's talk about the way it is today and what you're trying to drive towards.
Sure, absolutely. So today, it's a very fragmented environment because the public-private partnership is one in which our airports and airlines are regulated entities. We issue the regulatory activity for their security programs. They then instantiate those in security plans and programming, which means each of their data systems is separate. It's just the ability of the authorities, if you will. Same thing with TSA and CBP. We have separate systems because we have different authorities, and we have to keep it within the legal aspects of what we are or aren't allowed to do. What we've been able to start pioneering and scratching the surface a little bit deeper on is the idea that we can have system of records notices and authorities conversations around where that data needs to be shared. And what we want to drive to is a better passenger experience, a more seamless environment where the folks that need to have the data across that journey have that data, right? Essentially, you have a passenger data profile, if you will. Some of it's a security element, some of it's a commerce element associated with where you're sitting and where you're interacting in the airport. But we're at that point where we've got to lean in and sort out how we can automate all of those components. There's a concept that you could use potentially in the future, your biometric opt-in as your token throughout the journey. You could be recognized at a merchant in the airport, pay for your items using your biometric as a token. There are vendors in industry out there that have suggested that, and we can lean in and see how that progresses.
So we will have a touchless experience through the sort of TSA checkpoint at some point in time, it sounds like.
Yeah, so
is that the end state desire?
TSA wants to get out of touching people. Right. We want to get out of that business.
We want you out of that business.
Thank you very much.
And when can we expect that? Is that a year
I
out,
think
2 years out, 10 years out?
Parts of that are going to be there in the next probably 3 years.
Okay.
Other aspects of that are probably going to take a little bit longer, 5 to 6 years. In the United States, traveling internationally to the United States, you can do some compare and contrast real quick. Internationally, there's a lot of e-gates with aviation security. And that's because they only need the boarding pass. They don't care about the identity. They don't see it as a part of their mission because they didn't have a 9/11. They don't have a secure flight. And their border force handles the identity piece. In the United States, we care about that. It's together. And so just a moment to say, we're working on e-gates, but we have to do it in a way that's connected to secure flight. And so that's been our challenge, is making sure that we have the apparatus to be able to connect those and integrate that technology together. We're close. We have a prototype sitting in Las Vegas ready to go, and we're working with Yemi's team to be able to enable the connectivity. And so that's one that if we have the opt-in, you could do one-to-many matching against the travel verification system at CBP, and you could do a contactless entry into screening. And then if we can pilot that self-service screening concept, you may not ever have to talk to an officer in the screening process at all.
So that cloud, multi-cloud environment really makes a lot of sense. Look, we definitely don't want to be touched, but more importantly, we do want to stay safe. So we really do appreciate it. Matt, Kevin, we really do thank you for everything that you've done. And again, I want to, one more time, don't forget about that public service. You'll never regret it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again to TSA and Intel and Luke McCormack for moderating that great discussion. And we did get a lot of Zoom compliments for Mr. Gilkenson on his socks. So I just wanted to relay that message from our virtual audience. And at this point in the program, I would like to welcome up Chris Gilbert, who serves as an account executive with Dell Technologies. He's going to be introducing our next panel for you. So Chris, come on up.
Well, thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Gilbert, as Megan said, from Dell Technologies, and I have the privilege to introducing our next panel. Today we have Mr. Sonny Bhagowalia, Assistant Commissioner and CIO of CBP. We also have Scott Bowman that's going to be joining us, who is the Deputy CIO of FEMA. And then for our monitor today, we're going to have Charles Armstrong, who you may have known previously as the CIO of CBP and Deputy CIO of Homeland Security.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'll reiterate Luke's opening remarks. Thank you for everybody who's participating here in person and out in the meta universe. We really appreciate it, and especially big thank you to our participants, the Assistant Commissioner and CIO from Customs and Border Protection, and the Deputy CIO for Operations from FEMA. Obviously, you know, now we're getting ready to move down into the down and dirty part of cloud and what it takes to get there, and what things are like along the way, and what bodies are left afterwards. So I'm going to start off with kind of an open-ended question, and just for the Assistant Commissioner down there, tell us a little bit about your journey so far. You've obviously been doing this cloud journey for a number of years now, so tell us a little bit about your experience so far, and what have you encountered along the way? What lessons have you learned?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, I think the first thing I learned is I started off with dark hair, and now I've got gray hair. So there we go. So that's one more stage. Okay. Well, I think well, good to see you again, Charlie. And I think the first thing is, I remember I was Interior CIO when one of the former federal CIOs at the time asked a question that I think we have a little echo going on. Okay. So at that time, Vivek was sort of asking me, he's got some ideas on something called cloud, federal cloud. And it was a really interesting journey. I'm talking about 2009 timeframe. And so this whole thing started off with a policy that sort of, in our day job, we were, CIOs as a night job, sort of helping out, corollary duty. So I think this whole thing that he started was a really good concept. And it's taken all this time to really get that adoption up to the level that we are today. Having served as a 5-time CIO, I've just seen from the other side of it, what it takes to really make things happen. And it takes time, you know. It's supposedly by 2025, this will be a $1.3 trillion market. But I'd say the government adoption, which is, let's say government is about what, 80 to 100 billion that we spend in federal government alone. You know, I'd say about 10, 20% is cloud now, you know. So it's not really still to the level it needs to be, but it has really taken off in the last couple of years. So first things first, obviously, you know, I'm an engineer and a CIO by training and experience, so I get to say what I got to say, but this is what I've been approved to say. So sometimes I'll stay, in case you're wondering why I'm looking at a piece of paper, it's not because I can speak ad nauseum about the subject, but really there are some points that I think the team has prepared and what's been approved that I want to really talk about. I think the first thing I'll just say, we operate at the speed of mission. You know, Matt talked about some mission and what you've talked about, and you've been there, Charlie, so you know that at the speed of mission, our operations, we're transacting 10 billion transactions a day with 40 billion data exchanges. We're processing trillions of dollars. One of our systems processes $4 trillion. We're collecting the second largest collection agency at $98 billion. We're processing 1.2 million passengers, pedestrians every day. So what we got to do in this journey is make sure that it's secure and reliable and operates at the speed of mission. We're encountering 2.3 million encounters at the border. All of this stuff needs to be there. So we've got about 282 legacy apps, and I'll talk about that. And we've made tremendous progress in terms of getting at least 60% to the cloud. And so all of this takes time, but it takes cultural change. And I think we're all about moving from an application level portfolio of those 282 apps to getting to an operations portfolio so that stuff just works. So the app team under my deputy CIO and chief software officer works with the infrastructure team under the infrastructure officer, and then with the CTO bringing in innovation, and then working with our agents and officers, how do we innovate at the speed of mission? So there are four things that I think this journey that I've focused on, which throughout all these years, I think we could only do one of four, and now I think we can do about 3 or 4. Faster, meaning we can deploy things faster where, for example, in Operation Allies Welcome, when we had the evacuees from Afghanistan, we deployed in 7 countries around the world, and at the forward end, we were deploying things. Usually I have like 40, 50 teams doing concurrent agile software development, giving 2-week deliveries. I was able to do that in some areas next day on a mobile platform with facial comparison. How is that possible? There is stuff on the cloud at the back end that allows us to do that, facial recognition, other technologies. Better, more resilient, and making sure that a lot of the stuff that we do stays up longer, is reliable. In some instances, for example, in one of the systems, we used to have potentially a 5-minute outage, and I think, Charlie, you know what I'm talking about. We're down to 5 minutes. We've not even had an outage, actually, touch wood. Although I am getting a little something over here, but it's not cloud, it's something else. My point is, why is that? Because we have done the work, and to me, this is the other part that I want to talk about, is this is not a buzzword compliant kind of a thing. This is a lot of people doing solid work. You got to do the work to get there. And I think that's also part of the journey. You got to do the engineering, you got to have the processes. So it's people, policy, process, technology, governance. You got to have all of that stuff working together. And I think it's certainly doing that. I will say the other thing is agents need this stuff on these phones, anywhere, anytime, for any mission, securely and reliably. So how do we make that app work so that it can be getting that information from the cloud and making sure that data is secure? We got a lot of things like Records Act, FEMA Act, data. I mean, there's so many things that we have to comply with, as you know, Charlie. And I'm sure my colleagues will talk about that as well, is that, to me, that agility is there, but that performance is really, really important. You also gotta, so in addition to the faster, better, it's gotta be more secure. When I came in 2018, and we were having 40 million cyber attempts on us a day. Today, it's 100 million attempts a day. 40, 100. 10 billion transactions, 40 billion data exchanges, 100 million attempts. It's I don't know if it goes any grayer than this, but that's what it takes. So people are working really hard. I'm really proud of the team as to what we're doing on that. And I think that's another message in government. There's a lot of good work being done in government by industry and government, all working together to make that happen. We also have a strategy. We have a cloud strategy. We have that 60% already done. We need to get out of that data center to save money and then reinvest. And we're also doing a lot of stuff on data center optimization and also a cyber strategy and an overall strategy as to what we can do for the mission. But at the end of the day, Charlie, the bottom line is our journey to the cloud. I'm happy to report that from sort of an idea and a vision, it's now a reality. It's still happening. I still think there's still a little bit of ways away, and I'll leave with you with this thought. Out of those 282 apps, we also have something called high-value assets. I don't know if you've looked at that executive order, that these are the most important systems in the country that run the mission of the country. So I've got some systems that run all trade in the country, all border, all national security, all travel. These are massive systems. And as you know, you can't just move to the cloud just like that. You have to, that's why they're sitting in the data center now. We have a tier 4 data center. That stuff is moving last, but we want industry to help, and we'll be putting some things out there to get you to work with us, because it's going to take that level of engineering to make sure those work. So I'm really excited about this question. I think it's very positive to see where that journey started in 2009 to where we are today. I think adoption is increasing, and I think everyone's bought into this. For example, all this collaboration that we did during COVID was seamless. So even though 70% of we're the largest law enforcement agency in the United States at 66,000 people, everything was done seamlessly. 70% of that was working in the front lines at the 328 ports of entry and also our border patrol stations and so on and so forth, along with my staff that was there. But there's a 30% teleworking. All of that, remote work, telework, seamless. Through what? Collaborative tools. Where? In the cloud. So all of that has been working, and now with Microsoft Teams and WebEx and all this stuff, we're able to not only communicate from anywhere, also process that information. And I think Matt talked about some of the things on TVS. All of that stuff is done with 2-second adjudication in the cloud. So all of that stuff is faster, better, more secure, and lastly, I'll say more affordable. I will not say cheaper. There's a reason I say more affordable. More affordable is a pay-as-you-go utility that even though your outlay may be a little bit less, over time, it may be the same or a little bit over, but look at all the other benefits that you get, faster, better, and more secure.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bowman, obviously you've got a big mission at FEMA, a very important mission
Yes.
out there providing not just disaster relief, but grants and flood mapping and all kinds of things. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at FEMA in terms of cloud and what you've experienced so far.
So definitely a lot going on. I feel like I'm the person in the middle here. Back when we started the cloud journey, my hair was darker and I had more of it. I'm losing it and it's turning gray. So I'm transitioning to that final stage here. So it's good that I'm sitting in the middle. We've learned a lot. I would say we're about almost halfway through our journey, not quite as far along as CBP is. Going back to those early days when Vivek, issued the cloud first instruction and information, getting federal government to start accepting the cloud. We had some systems that went out. They kind of predated FedRAMP and got out there early. That was the exception, not the rule. So it has been slow going, slower than we would have liked. What we've realized here recently over the past few years is that we needed more governance and structure around our migration to the cloud. So within FEMA, we issued a Cloud Smart Computing Directive a few years ago, and that's to ensure that FEMA is in compliance with the OMB Cloud Smart strategy and going forward, ensuring that we go to cloud first. Cloud is the first solution that we look at. If it isn't possible, then that's fine. We'll go to other solutions, but we need to evaluate the cloud as we go forward. So what we've been working on over the past few years is actually standing up what we call a FEMA Enterprise Cloud environment within the top 3 cloud service providers. So we have now established a footprint there. Our customers have different requirements. As you mentioned, flood insurance is very different than our grants management, which is different than our individual assistance, and our direct assistance to disaster survivors. So they have differing needs, and we didn't want to limit ourselves to one cloud service provider or another. So we've actually established footprints in multiple environments there. And you know, there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just going and procuring the cloud service provider and standing that up. It's the security, it's the network connectivity, it's, you know, doing all of that appropriately. It's implementing zero trust as we go forward. So it doesn't happen nearly as fast as we would like. I wish we were done at this point, and we are not. There's a lot of work that goes into doing it and doing it right. I would say the other thing at FEMA is, you know, we're not limiting ourselves to one solution or another. So, you know, we're looking at software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service, and leveraging all three platforms. So as much as possible, we want to go with software as a service, low code, no code. But we are definitely, especially for some of the legacy stuff, looking at infrastructure as a service, standing that up, and also leveraging platform as a service. A few things that we've learned along the way. Obviously, the need for good contracts. You've got to be able to not only set up the cloud service providers and the connectivity to them, but you've got to have the expertise in-house in order to ensure that it's done correctly. So that, you know, definitely contracting is a big thing, secure connectivity, monitoring the cloud, setting up the full logging, everything that's needed in the cloud to ensure that you've got a secure environment. The other thing that we've done is establish a lot of inheritable controls for our authority to operate, to streamline that process. As we all know, the governance and the security seem to be what take the longest. They take the longest. The technology is easy. You could go out today and stand up a cloud environment and be up and running by the end of the day, but you don't have that governance and that security that's required by the federal government. Another thing that we learned along the way is the cost management and cost estimation, ensuring that we stay within the bounds. As most of us know, the government operates as a debit card, not a credit card. So we need to have the funding in place before we consume the resources. So ensuring that we don't overburn, overconsume was critical. So that has been one of our main focus areas, and also understanding what our customers and what we are getting into as we migrate to the cloud. What we don't want to do is migrate to the cloud and find out that it costs a lot more. And so far, we haven't found that, but that's been part of that implementation of our cloud group that does the analysis and the cost estimating to ensure that we know exactly what resources we need, what we're going to be consuming, and then ensuring we stay within those bounds. And, you know, if something is all of a sudden going crazy and charging $1,000 an hour instead of $1 an hour, you need to know that immediately and work to find out what's going on and stop that. So those are some of the things that we've gone through. And like I said, we're about halfway through with our cloud journey to this point.
Thank you. You know, I really thought when I retired from federal service, I was going to stop getting taskings from Luke McCormack, but it appears that, you know, we have a question that got passed over from his group. It also kind of dovetails into what I was hoping to discuss in it. So let me ask, what has been the impact on your workforce? I know, AC, you talked a little bit about what your structure is within your organization. How has that evolved over time? And I know, Mr. Bowman, you talked about the need for a different way of doing contracting and the ramifications around that. But overall, what have you all done in terms of looking at the workforce, changing things, and what's your strategy there?
Yep. No, we saw that ball being passed to us. That was faster than the Washington Commanders, I guess, when they did the toss sweep. Right. Sorry. Right. Okay. No more jokes on Washington Commanders. All right. I think you want me to go first?
No, yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So I think first of all, there's a lot of things here on the workforce side of it, because as we're trying to be deploy faster, better, more secure, more affordable, There are different skill sets that go with each of those words. But I'll add two more words to that: transparency and accountability. Scott talked about accountability. The CFO always like, hey, the CIOs always come and ask for money, and there's always a sob story. The dog ate my homework. I didn't really do all the stuff. There's more data coming in. All kinds of security challenges. Absolutely legit reasons. But the first thing is with the workforce, I first try to tell them what the cloud program is. So a lot more training, communications, and outreach and awareness. Not only for the stakeholders first. So I've got now first with the stakeholder workforce. So the stakeholders need to know what does cloud do for them, and they have bought in through dashboards. We have done communications. I've got something called a Trusted Partnership Initiative, where I sit down monthly to quarterly with each of the 20 stakeholders within CBP. I also sit down with all the countries. So we operate in 98 countries. We're also operating with the 5I countries. In fact, we're going over to meet with them. So those CIOs, we discuss what those are. Anyway, all these stakeholders need the, first of all, a transparency, so show them where they are in their cloud journey and what benefits they're getting. And then the accountability, which is sort of like TBM concepts, We were lucky enough to be the second federal agency to get an award for TBM, but we have open dashboards that I share with everyone so that they can understand what the Amazon cost is, what this cost is, what the operational move cost is, all of that stuff. And I think what that's done, Charlie, is at least take that aspect of it and educate that workforce to be with us. On the other side of the provider, that's the consumer side of it. On the provider side of it, everyone's concerned a little bit about their job, literally, right? It's like, hey, I used to do, server huggers and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, they did a great job, if you think about it. Also, these legacy, we always talk about legacy like it's it's the car that brung you. I drive a 1994 SUV. It's reliable as hell. It's better than the ones that I got now, and it works, right? So some of the stuff works. So we got to just be a little bit appreciative of the fact that legacy technology works. It's survived this far, but cloud is better. And now, how do I make that example to make sure it's not only about the technology, it's about the data? We in the government do a really poor job of the classification of the data and how to bring that in and migrate that data correctly, and then do the business continuity of that, all that. So I think training, giving them other things to do. For example, if you're not doing technical, most of the govies are doing technical supervision, but we've got a lot of folks who are also doing technical work. So in conjunction with our contractor workforce, so make it a win-win situation. Give them training in terms of what cloud is, the management of the application so that they can be embedded more with the agents and officers as to what the mission is and how they can deploy faster by understanding the business process, what this cloud can do for the mission. I've got people who are embedded. For example, when they were doing the Operation Allies Welcome, we were also doing the Uniting for Ukraine. I can't talk too much about it, but I can tell you there is substantial progress that has been done in those areas. I'm talking 100,000 people evacuated in Afghanistan, all done very quickly. The other stuff done days with full accounting of what's coming in and out, who's coming in, what level, all that stuff. It's all cloud-based. It's all cloud-based with apps. So I think app delivery, the training, making sure that the mission is there so they understand what the mission is and then see how the solutions can be made to make that happen. The security of it, data, right? It's all about the data. Where is that data? And so I think training in that area, defining the key roles, responsibility, authority, I think that's been key. We're also looking at sort of stuff in terms of governance in the area of cost. This has been the biggest challenge in cloud, in my view, cost. It's very hard to look at the cost, looking at that. So I think that training of that. And then I think just making sure that people understand that their job is no longer the technology, in some cases development, but more of the management, and then working together in these cross-functional teams, they can get these things done. And it's very energizing. Uniting for Ukraine, massive program. For example, the Operation Allies Welcome, the largest airlift in U.S. history. We were doing this in days, fully operational. Uniting for Ukraine, fully operational. Largest border surge, we're doing it right now. Anyway, I can go on. But my point is, all of this is only possible because of people are learning. But at the end of the day, you got to give them confidence that they're here with us learn some new skills. It's a chance for them to advance. And I'll just stop up with this. We have got something like 58 AI projects, AI ML projects going on, 158 robotic process automation projects going on. These are all new things they can learn. Data, a new thing on data. So I think all the Govies are very excited to learn some of these newer projects, and we need to tell them that that's how it is, and learn a little bit about cloud as well. But I think I'm really impressed with what the industry is doing in this area, and I think we need to team up with them to offer sort of, don't be afraid of the cloud. It's not going to be, automation will not take your job away. You can use this because there's plenty of jobs to do, and I look at it as there's plenty of work for everyone, and there's not enough hours in the day to do that mission. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that to me is the workforce answer.
Thank you. Mr. Bowman.
Yeah, I would say for the workforce, fear, concern, what are you doing? Why are you moving my cheese? Why are you taking my job? What am I going to do? All of the emotions, I think, are the initial reaction to that. But at the end of the day, once, we sit down with the team and understand, the big thing with them was communicating with them, making sure they understand what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. And also ensuring that they have the training that they need to be successful as we go forward. We're still working on that. We're about halfway through. And I think one of the things that they've really started to realize as we're going through the process is a lot of what we have on-prem, the legacy environment, as Sonny said, it's the car that brung you. Well, a lot of that's virtualized today. They do that remotely. They're not coming into the office every day and touching the server or touching the storage area network. So a lot of those things, they weren't doing day to day anyway. And you really, the cloud, it's someone else's servers, it's someone else's data center. So the things that we're doing virtually in our data center are very similar to what we're doing in the cloud and the different cloud service providers. We're doing it remotely. So as we've gotten into it and learned more, it isn't as big of a change as they thought it was going to be. So there's less fear the more that they've learned.
Yeah. Could I just add one thing on that? Sure. I think in our culture in America, too often we are like, yeah, it's old, it's legacy, shaming, oh, you know that. Actually, it's more genius. When I went to the CIO Hawaii, I found that they had a VAX computer working for 40 years. I called the guy and gave him an award, but then I told him we got to go to the cloud. But I embraced the guys. Like, you are a genius for keeping this thing, how long? A PDP, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Right. He was buying stuff on eBay and making stuff work, and then he can easily learn the cloud. It's nothing. So we got to change this culture of, it's old and everything new is shiny and great. It's not. There's a lot of other challenges. So you gotta do that. And I think to Scott's great point also about the fact that once they learn all this stuff, I tell you what's exciting is when you give them, you're part of the mission. The Operation Allies welcome, when we recognize the team, a lot of them were in tears because it represents the greatest values of America. We honored our commitment, and we helped somebody. You could see that mission happening. So when they're involved in that mission, it's not about servers and cloud, it becomes something else. And I think that is where this is going. So it becomes a service that works. Now, I will say with industry, we need to make sure the stuff stays up, but touch wood so far. We've only had one or two things here and there, but overall, it's gone much, much better. There are 2 or 3 more sigmas of reliability that we've gained. And I think people are gaining more. Instead of previously, it was like my jobs. I think they're learning more like, hey, how can this be used for this mission or this project that you're doing? And they can like, oh my goodness, I can serve that mission faster and better. So let me go there.
Yeah. And one of the things I've communicated to my team and the various folks throughout FEMA is we didn't become IT people and technology people to do the same thing every single day, year after year after year. We did this to learn new stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Technology is evolving continually. So rise to that challenge, learn new stuff. It's not scary. And once they get into it, they are accepting it and willing to learn new things and move off of some of the legacy solutions that we have implemented.
I already went off script, by the way, so the VAX example is just an example, all right? That's my own personal one. That was not in the script.
So you're not running a VAX?
No. It was pretty cool back in the day.
It's very reliable.
So AC, you talked a little bit about new functionality that you're delivering in
Yeah.
cloud. Have you done any modernization of old stuff while you've been migrating? I mean, or has it just pretty much been a replatforming, or what?
I mean, no. In some cases, no. The answer is in some cases it's completely new. In some cases, I got to change. Like for example, the ACE collections. We were the first agency in DHS to get the TMF funds, and from ACE collections. So we actually also updated the COBOL code, and also we use mainframe as a service in the cloud. We were one of the first agencies to do that as well. So that's good, but still a mainframe, right? It's as a service, but kind of quasi-cloud with stuff going on. I won't name that vendor, but it works. So hey, I'm nothing against that. Mainframes work, it's fine. But eventually, I'd like to go completely cloud.
Sure.
I think the re-platform, all of that stuff, we are getting more visibility by talking to these vendors and finding out exactly what the architecture is. When I was Treasury CIO, I remember, I won't talk to the name of the company, I found out that we had a more in-depth deep dive into where their stuff was traversing, and the vendor industry was really amazed. Why am I asking these detailed questions? The reason is we are all held accountable to statutory laws that have penalties associated with that. If there is a breach of data or something like that, we are held liable. So I wanted to make sure that through the entire transit, there's confidentiality, right? Right? And availability and all the other good stuff that goes with it. So anyway, so all of that stuff is really, really important. So I think the answer is, in some cases, re-platform, but a lot of new cases are completely new. And at the end of the day, cloud is what? It's applications, platform, and infrastructure, So I got to have all the things going. We have networking going with EIS and upgrading all of that to 5G and now they're even talking about 6G before even doing 5G yet, right? And a lot of times they say 5G, but it's 5GE, which means it's not exactly 5G. It's, what I'm saying? It's quasi 5G. So we're looking at all these technologies, a lot of stuff going on in AI, ML, NLP, natural language processing, a lot of stuff going on in robotic process automation, a lot of Silicon Valley innovation that we're bringing in through Schedule 880 innovation. We're also working with, I guess we can say this is CIA, NQTEL kind of innovation that's coming in. So all of that stuff working is bringing some exciting technologies that are coming in. But I'm keeping stuff going because, first of all, I got to keep the lights on and operations working, number one. And I'm happy to report that is going really well because I focused on that. I focused on a lot of good things you built. And so just keeping that going. So that is working really well. And so thank you for making sure that all that foundation was there. So that's working well. But now I can, with newer technology available from industry, I can sort of, shift things out, so to speak, and bring things in. Privacy records is still a big issue for us. I will say data is the next big frontier. I'm going to be hiring a chief data officer very soon. Data is the next thing. We're dealing in petabytes of information. I think making sure this stuff is available so that I can use data analytics on the fly. I can do on-the-fly data visualization. All of that stuff is the future that I see is coming, and I think the cloud will enable that. I think mobility with the cloud, making that stuff happen with new technologies like facial recognition, and facial comparison, also more security, all of that stuff will be the future in my view.
Mr. Bowman, yes, could you elaborate on that question a little bit?
Yeah, so as far as migrations, rehosting, lift and shift, modernization, what are we doing? All of the above. I think many organizations are in a similar situation where you have a lot of legacy, and again, legacy is not a bad word, but we have a lot of legacy applications. Within FEMA. I like to say, as a software developer, applications should not be old enough to drink, but we've got several applications that are over 21 years old, so they are old enough to drink. So initially, the plan was to modernize those as we go forward. We have a lot of major enterprise modernization initiatives, our financial systems modernization, our grants management modernization. And the thought was that these solutions would take over a lot of these legacy apps. And what we're seeing is there's been some delays there. So now we have legacy apps that are running another life cycle iteration longer than we thought they were going to. So we're actually doing something that 2 years ago we said we would never do, that we were not going to do, absolutely weren't going to do it, and that's basically rehosting or lift and shift, if you will. Picking up some of these legacy applications and moving them as is with very little refactoring, very little change, and putting them in the cloud. Some of the reasons for doing that are these lifecycle iterations, buying the on-prem hardware, paying the on-prem cooling costs and power costs, get to be very expensive. Specifically for FEMA, one of the things we have is we have to be able to support the maximum for disasters. How big is the next disaster going to be? And without knowing that, I've got to have the hardware and software on-prem to support it today. So the scalability of the cloud and being able to move to the cloud, so with our individual assistance registrations, they may take a few hundred registrations a day on a normal day, and then a large hurricane hits or something like that, and we could be taking 100,000 registrations a day every day for weeks on end, similar to what we did in the 2017 hurricane season. So by moving some of these things to the cloud, it will allow us to run on a smaller footprint, less hardware, less software day to day, and then surge as needed. So that scalability of the cloud is a big plus for us, even running legacy applications in the cloud.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing. Two quick examples, just 1 or 2 minutes here. First is ACE portal, that same system that processes the, like I said, 4 trillion. So, 2.7 in imports, 1.6 in exports, trillion. That system, we have now come up with a portal that allows first to modernize, so there's CX. What used to be, is now customer experience, right? Was citizen experience, not customer experience. That whole thing is completely modern, along with multi-factor authentication. So it's something you know and something you have, along with that. So we have looked at almost 60,000 users, trade users in various communities, and they're having that experience. So now we've got to attest them and validate, make sure they're who they are. So identity management has become really, really key. I've also migrated SAP completely to the cloud, So who are the two people you got to keep happy in an organization? Your boss and the CFO, right? So SAP is migrated to the cloud. They're seeing like, oh wow, this is really working. So now I can have a different conversation as to how this cloud can benefit them and with the other stakeholders. So I think, Charlie, this has been key, and I think Scott would agree with me, is this conversation is enabling CIOs to get more street creds, and we are absolutely being able to show that, hey, we're doing this together. Full transparency, you can see the dashboards. In fact, it's becoming so transparent, they're like, I got too many dashboards, okay, I'm good. No, I got more. No, I'm good. No, please. So my point is, and that's a big change for CIOs, right? And previously, like, I think you're hiding something from me. They're not. We are absolutely moving that forward. So I think that is really a new conversation.
Great. Megan?
Well, thank you, gentlemen. We have a few minutes left, so I did want to just get to some of the questions from our virtual audience. And as a reminder for the folks in person, we, of course, are taking your questions. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about a couple that you might want to ask. But we did get a great question from someone. They were asking, with so many government agencies moving to cloud, how integrated are they? And for example, is it easy for CBP users to share data with DoD or vice versa? And does data have to be passed between users, or is it cross-cloud access enabled? And I don't know if there's even some anecdotes between CBP
Sure.
and FEMA you might be able to share.
Well, so first of all, Operation Allies welcome. We got the notice, and the next day, everyone's scrambling, trying to figure out how we make this thing happen. We had DoD, obviously DHS, all the agencies here. We had State Department and others all working together. How do we solve this problem? And data sharing was intrinsically a part of that. Well, all things said and done, we have to make sure we can vet the folks who are coming in. Who are they? Some of them are running from persecution, and they literally had to burn documents, otherwise they may not have survived. How do I still make that happen? Well, guess what? CBP already had some groundbreaking technology that we have a global ecosystem already working. We've processed 500 million people over the last 4 years, whatever, if you take a look at it, successfully at 99.5 to 99.8% efficiency within that 2-second adjudication stuff I'm talking about, with additional vetting on the high side. We use an ATS global facial with the mobile. We gave it to DoD. They were able to, anyone could just take that information, send it in. We did all the vetting on this side, and checked all that information coming in and out, to the point that I'll just say that DoD was like blown away. Who's got this technology? It was DHS. It was us. And so that's one example. Another example is the immigration journey. You know, we have unified immigration portal, and now we have HHS, DHS, all the components within DHS, and now DOJ coming in. How we can integrate that journey with the unified immigration portal. My point is, these things are happening. Do we have everything yet? No, absolutely not. There's a long journey ahead in terms of why is that? I think what people need to appreciate is that there are a lot of statutory and statutes that we have to comply with. And it's not as easy just to kind of poo-poo that. These laws and legal things are making it more difficult. We can easily do this, but we got to get the policy that goes with that. So sometimes technology gets in front of policy, and that's a problem, right? And so that whole thing needs to be changed. But the answer to your question is absolutely. And working with, for example, FEMA, they're tracking Fiona at the moment. FEMA is obviously the main agency that goes forward. We track it in terms of what's happening on our side. And so I think this is going to be a growth area for information sharing in the cloud. I don't know, Scott.
Totally agree. I think the technology's there, and it's a possibility and capability that exists, and we have that set up with a lot of our partners already. But having to do it on the fly, your statements of records notification, your data sharing agreements. There's a lot of process, governance, policy, and laws that go into who you can share data with, how you can share the data. So having those things adapt to the speed of the cloud, we're not there yet, but it is improving and getting better.
And by the way, the only reason why all this works is when you have a common mission. When stuff is happening and all these things are coming at you, and everyone wants to work together, it's really amazing what we can do. And I think the government's doing a heck of a good job, actually, thanks to industry as well, who are supporting us.
No, those are both great answers and really help to clarify that point. And I think we do have an audience question.
Hi, I'm Fatma Akhtar, and I had a question around climate and sustainability. So as we move to the cloud, and it's one of the strategic elements of FEMA's strategic plan is to make sure that we are, we're taking climate change into consideration. So what are you all doing as we move to the cloud and to operate more effectively in the cloud in regards to climate and sustainability?
Yeah, one thing that I would say is just the move to the cloud and decreasing the on-prem data centers. As I mentioned earlier, one of the issues with FEMA and having to have that almost unlimited scalability on-prem means that I'm running that every day. So that right there in and of itself is taking into account a lot of power, a lot of cooling. So, just moving to the cloud will help, climate change from that perspective. We're going to consume less power, less air conditioning, things like that as we go forward. Also, leveraging collaboration tools in the cloud, cutting down on greenhouse gas emissions as we don't have to travel as much. We're teleworking a lot more. We can work with our partners so we don't have to drive from one office to another office. That's another area. Looking at electrifying our fleet internally. There's a lot of things going on within FEMA. Related to climate change, and those are some of the things within the mission support area that we're looking at. Also ensuring that we have the ability, with the data center, you've got failover capability. So if we were to have issues on the East Coast, we can fail over to the West Coast, and we don't have outages like we used to in the past. So if we're running in a California data center and they lose power or have a brownout, we could transfer to the East Coast and run there. So there are some flexibilities that we gain with moving to the cloud as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that obviously when this journey started, what's not known as well, but there was a report that Vivek started before he did the policy, and that study is what we did at that time, was how many servers there are in the government. And what was the PUE and efficiency ratings of this, right? And then he came up with the first policy, which was 40% reduction of servers at the time by a certain date. And then also the PUE efficiency. That PUE was never really investigated more, but as we go to leads-based data centers and all these green data centers and emissions and all that kind of stuff, that is one measure. Now, what has not been corroborated or correlated is what happens with that number in the data center vice what's in the cloud and how much stuff you're comparing. So I don't know if anyone's done a study on that. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that question, but I would submit to you, I think it's probably we have saved, we are doing better. We're certainly doing better in terms of the number of servers and data centers that we cut. So I think from that standpoint, both those are positive things. In addition to the fact that there is now more focus on a green approach. So we have a green trade strategy, we're doing sustainability, but not at the cost of just like coming up with some fictional technology that doesn't work. I mean, stuff has got to work. When I need 100 amps, I need 100 amps now. I need 100 amps to work, and so I think if that's the case, if solar and others can give me that continuously with all the other things that I have to do with Six Sigma level availability for a tier 4 data center, the answer is absolutely we're looking into that. And I think that carbon footprint is going down. I drive an electric vehicle, by the way, but I do have an SUV too. So I said that earlier. I like my SUV too, and so I balance it out. So.
Sure. And Charlie, I think I will turn it over to you for any final thoughts from your panelists or any final questions you might have.
Just like in a nutshell, what would you like to see out of industry going forward? And I always think back, Sonny, when I was in your job, the big challenge we had around moving between data centers was the ability to have the bandwidth to move the volumes of data back and forth, right? A lot of that's gotten solved over the past few years, but not without a lot of, beating of knuckles and talking to folks and adopting new methodologies that allow us to scale up those pipes and scale down those pipes. And I just use that as a frame of reference. What are those types of things, that are kind of top of mind for you all that you would like to see industry really hit hard on to make your life easier?
Yeah, so I look at industry from two standpoints. I've been in industry in a Fortune 30 company, sort of served there, so I know what that value proposition is, having served also in the government. I think first things first, we're in this together, and what are the services that you can do for the mission? I think it energizes people. It's not just about money, it's about mission. People love that stuff. When they see that they do something that is value added, it's something. So I think that's one. I'd like to see more enterprise service catalogs of services that's available with clear definitions. It's almost like clear accounting of what comes with it. So I know absolutely beyond the shadow of a doubt, like a blockchain or something. I know what's in there. So that would be a second thing. I think automation. If that's all automated and works and it provides me as a service, I'm happy with that. If it's platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, whatever that is, I'm good with it. I think standardization. There was a question earlier about how does CBP work with industry on that biometric entry exit, handling all these hundreds of millions of passengers. The answer is this is the reason why that's a genius of system. Is that it's not a government-managed system. We have just put the standards out there, and so we do our part of it, and then the industry meets us at those standards, and then we process that. So that's an incredible government-industry partnership. So I think something like that, I think, is going to be the future as we're getting to these new worlds of stuff that's going on. I like to see more innovation come in. One of the things reason why these RPA and AI/ML and all these projects and innovation projects are so successful, I've got 136 innovation projects run by the Commissioner's Office. My CTO is supporting that, but I'm not the lead on it. Even on the RPA and the AI/ML projects, I have taught them how to fish. Anyone in our stakeholders can do the job. They just have to register with me. They know how to use some of the tools. I help them with consulting if they need be. I'd like industry to provide those services. There's plenty of room for everyone. We're talking, we have a multi-billion dollar budget. There's a lot of opportunity to bring this in, and this is what excites people. So I think that innovation and excitement is the perfect mix that needs to come in. I'd also talk about the G word, governance. It's a word that people don't understand, and governance could be anything from configuration management and engineering level lifecycle on CI/CD pipelines, all the way up to governance of data, governance of ethics in AI/ML using cloud. So I think all of these services we're going to be putting out there. We are going to just put out the enterprise small business contract. So small business, we're putting more there. So stay tuned. It's just going to be announced, or maybe I announced it. We have done that. It's RFI is already out there. So that's going to be one. ECIS is a cloud-based service that we're looking for, and we want people to help us. That's another one. We're already working on EIS right now. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out. Innovation, there's going to be some stuff on innovation, there's stuff on data. So I think all these things from industry. I'm looking for industry, just bring qualified people. Don't give me labor categories that are like, $7,000 an hour or whatever. Just give me some categories of folks where, a lot of people, it's not just money, they come in, they love the work. I've got people who are working with me right now. They can easily triple their salary, even in industry, triple that, but they love the work. So I think there's a good balance there. So a lot of good work to do. Transparency in the government, we can do better. They can participate with us. I think there's bright horizon ahead. And so I just think a lot of positivity up ahead for us.
Mr. Bowman?
I would say, continue with the reliability and the availability, a knock on wood. It's been pretty good, but even large cloud service providers are not immune to an outage every once in a while. Yes. So as we move these critical services to the cloud, please, keep everything up and running and operational. A financial model that works better with the government. That's been one of our big challenges. Yes. Is making sure we've got that financial model in place that works well with the way the government works. In the government, if you want money, you should have asked for it 2 or 3 years ago. So that's a challenge. It's difficult to get money right now, today or tomorrow. So as you introduce new technologies, we may want to invest and move forward in that, but it takes planning and time. So, we're trying to put things in place so that we're ready to modernize. Moving forward, the machine learning, RPA, we're definitely going in those directions, and our customers are helping drive those directions because they have the requirements. And I totally agree with what you said, Sonny. Teach them to fish. Let them start doing this. As we get more into low code and no code, how can we empower our, not just the technical IT people, but our users and our business users to do it themselves, so that they can be the ones out there, and it becomes a force multiplier when they're able to do these things and automate their own processes. Again, there's governance, there's security, there's management, that we have to have those controls and that overlay, but it's exponential when we can get them to do those things on their own.
Yeah, if I could just say one thing, the supply chain security, watch out for supply chain security. Y'all are just as targeted as we are. Don't be fooled. The insider threat, the external threat, the level of sophistication of what they're doing with zero-day attacks, Log4j, level 10 out of 10 security problem. I see industry, I deal with industry, and I can tell you, sometimes people think, well, government is not far ahead. Government is way ahead in some areas, but it doesn't really help me. If I'm ahead or you're ahead, doesn't really matter. If we are connected, we both need to be ahead together. So I look at it as, this is an America problem. We are all, here in America. We're serving the U.S. government. We're serving the United States of America. Get it done. Let's go and talk to each other and figure that out on cyber. So cybersecurity, supply chain is a big area of concern for us. And I think, as you mentioned, the accountability, fixed price, cost plus. I know, a lot of challenges here, but if you have some other ideas, give us those ideas as to how we can do better, because agile acquisition is still I guess, a hope for us. So we'll just leave it at that.
The agile acquisition, the agile cybersecurity, it's, we have agile programming, but the other parts of it haven't quite caught up. And another thing, FedRAMP, making sure that everyone knows what comes with the FedRAMP approved environment and what doesn't. We've had a lot of vendors tell us, oh, you can do this and you can do that. And then you find out that, well, you can't do that in FedRAMP, or that service isn't available in FedRAMP. So just ensuring that everyone knows which environments we're talking about.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if I could ask the audience to give us a big round of applause for these two great servants to the U.S. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much,
and thank you, Mr. Armstrong, for moderating. And we're so grateful to hear about the ongoing work at FEMA and CBP to better operationalize cloud and what this means for mission outcomes. So really grateful for your participation. And we have a final panel discussion. We're going to pivot a little bit and look at Department of Defense strategy around cloud. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Ms. Lily Zeleke. She is the Acting Deputy CIO for Information Enterprise in the Office of the CIO at Department of Defense. We also have Mr. Bob Schumm, Vice President for Strategic Programs within Oracle's National Security Group. And we are honored today to be joined, please come on up. We are honored today to be joined by Mr. Terry Halvorsen. Many of you may recall he is the former CIO at the Department of Defense, and he will be moderating for us today. So let's give them all a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all still staying here past 3 o'clock on a beautiful Friday, one of the probably last beautiful Fridays we'll see in Washington for a while. We appreciate it. And we're going to hopefully have a fairly enlightened discussion and a fun discussion about hybrid and multi-cloud. So we've got two great panelists today. Lily Zeleke, who is the acting Deputy for Information at the DoD CIO, and Bob Schumm. Bob Schumm, yes, I'm sorry, from Oracle.
Right.
So we're going to ask a couple questions and have a pretty good discussion on this, but we will also at the end take questions from the audience here. So let me first say this. A lot of discussions about what is hybrid cloud, what is multi-cloud, what's the difference between multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and just connecting 4 clouds. So I thought we would start with a little discussion about, from the panelists, what does multi-cloud, hybrid cloud mean to you, and what do you see is the value that will bring forward? So we'll start first with you, Lily.
Thank you, Mr. Halvorsen. Thank you, everyone, for having us here. And, well, multi-cloud, for me, represents the ability to have flexibility in the way we acquire cloud, the services we're going to be able to acquire, covering broader requirements, and the ability to tap into our industry partners in a greater way. So this buys us the ability to do the things that we need to do for the warfighter and really for the workforce from at all classification levels, from the home front to the tactical edge. So to us, multi-cloud means that you're buying the flexibility, the security, the resiliency, that we need in a way that expands our ability to acquire from the various CSPs.
Bob, what do you think?
So for our perspective, multi-cloud, we have many customers who take advantage of the different offerings that are available. We have an interconnect commercially with Microsoft Azure. They have applications they want to run in one cloud that use an Oracle backend. And so we have many customers who want to take advantage of the best of all of the cloud providers and to be able to pick and choose between them which services best meet their needs.
Let me follow up a little bit of that with you, just 1 second. So would that imply that some of the cloud providers have different strengths?
They do. So I think each one has certain levels of maturity of the products and their offerings. And some have different security, some have different product offerings they're able to offer. And so for a customer to be able to pick and choose based on your requirements, your workload, your security requirements, you need to think about how do I get the best of breed of what's available between across the clouds.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you on that with another question. But one of the things that I think we have to think about with cloud is how do you move to the cloud? And I think we be honest, DoD moving to the cloud has some interesting problems. A, scale, and B, how much legacy it has. That's going to require some modernization efforts. So Lily, tell us about how you're looking at modernization to help you move to the cloud.
Well, I think you hit the challenge that we have with respect to moving to multi-cloud or any cloud for that matter. is our ability to take what we have today, the capabilities that we need today, and translate them into the cloud is going to require not just technology changes. I think I keep saying technology is probably the easier part, not easy, but the easier part. But we have processes that we need to navigate. We have funding and resourcing challenges that we need to navigate. We have skill set challenges we need to navigate. So when we talk about modernization, I think a lot of times people just think technology. And, if we can just refactor, old systems, or if we can just acquire new systems. But all of these factors play into that decision. But also, honestly, the mission requirement and the adversary and their ability to navigate and penetrate our security perimeters. Various things come into play in a way that it's not just technology, but all of these things that I listed that is going to require, not just within DoD, but all of our industry partners and academia, et cetera, is going to have to band together to be able to address modernization.
So following up one of the points you made there about the mission environment. So we've seen a lot more, I think, from DoD emphasis now on how is multi-hybrid cloud really going to support the warfighter. So how are you looking at that, and what do you think was the changes that you'll need to consider as you look more at the warfighter mission set?
At the warfighter mission set, so I think one of the biggest one that I would say is the tactical edge, which if we want to have a seamless communication and operation and sort of executing what we need, this war that we're fighting, over information technology these days, it is going to require us to be able to address that, for example. We have some aging systems that we're going to have to address. They're capable, they do the job, but are they efficient? Are we going to be able to continue using them to interoperate with the newer threat and technologies that we're facing? I'm sure we're finding out that that's going to be a challenge. So we're going to have to your earlier point of the hybrid model we talked about, we're going to have to maintain certain systems. We're going to have to continue to innovate. We're going to have to continue to build new systems. And the cloud, in my view, is part of that. And really, for us to be able to continue to transition to the cloud, we have to continue to also sort of live out, maintain, get rid of this technical debt we always talk about in some way, make a dent in that eventually to get us to fully cloud native kind of operation.
History probably has a challenge here too, in that we've done a lot of work, what I'll say, supporting mainstream cloud environments. This is going to require industry to do some things differently. How are you looking at what you will have to do differently, and what might the whole industry, if we're really truly going to get a hybrid cloud environment available to the warfighter at the edge?
So there's been discussions already about how to do multi-cloud across the national security space on existing cloud contracts, and we're working with other CSPs to try and make it a seamless interface for our customers. Customers want to be able to, take their data, own their data, move their data, and they don't need to have an artificial obstacle put in by one of the CSPs. And so we're very much working towards trying to have a playing field where a customer can easily move between them, get the benefit of competition and price, and have offerings that they get to choose from.
Do you think this is going to require some new technology to make sure that the edge can, if not stay connected, when it is disconnected, stay as current as possible with its data so that when it reconnects, there's not a complete dead time?
So, for example, our edge computing device, the Oracle Roving Edge, it's designed to be disconnected and then to sync back up when it comes connected. It's designed to be a mesh in and of itself. So if you have a hub and spoke and you lose the hub, that it can continue to work forward. And I think that the technology, again, I don't think it's the hard part. I think everybody understands the challenges that are out there. And I see from the various CSPs offerings from smaller scale to large scale to a trailer size opportunity. So there's different form factors to fit whatever the mission need would be.
You talked about value. DoD's got this technical debt and value. What are you looking for from industry to be able to demonstrate that you really are going to get value from this hybrid cloud solution? What are some of the factors industry should be considering that says, if you do this, yes, we're more convinced that in this hybrid environment, we'll get the value we want?
I think there are different factors, in my view, that go into that. And from a DoD standpoint, first of all, are you going to be able to meet the mission capability requirement? Second, are you going to be able to do it at cost that is palatable to the department? As you know, we're resource limited. I know it sounds like the department has a lot of dollars, but it's also a big organization with extremely vast mission and very complicated systems. And also really the ability to work together, the industry sort of working together to come up with solutions that one may not be able to offer, that they may collectively may be able to offer. In my view, a cloud contract like a JWCC could bring that kind of synergy to the future of where we're trying to go with innovation and modernization and the ability to sort of quickly get ourselves out of technical debt.
As you think about the non-technology problems, are people one of those?
Oh, absolutely. I always tell this to people as I talk to some of my colleagues. We always say, technology is complex, but people are complicated. We are complicated. Our processes are complicated. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. But also, in order for us to make change, we have to evolve. The way we do business, the way we communicate, the way we sort of make decisions on resourcing, et cetera. So I would say yes, people. But the other piece of it is we, the people, are the ones that are moving the ball forward. So we need to have the right skill set. We need to have the right support to be able to do that. And I think that is a lot of what our focus within the department right now is also not just in modernization, is the workforce piece, enhancing that and the way we sort of upskill. And I think earlier you and I were chatting about, looking within also to get some of the smart people to work on these kinds of technology and modernization, because we have a vast pool of knowledge within the department, but also getting that industry knowledge base into to augment our need from a people, process, knowledge base, workforce standpoint.
Thank you. A little bit different take on that same question. From an industry standpoint, as you're looking to talk to DoD, what do you think are some of the non-technical issues that DoD maybe needs to look at a little differently?
So one of the promises of cloud is the speed of innovation, and that the technology and services can change rapidly. And I think from an acquisition model, the model is still set up to buy hardware, buy certain software products, and that's your tool set. That's all you have to put together, as opposed to an ever-changing landscape. And so I'm investing a certain amount of money, and a new service came along, which is far better than one that I was consuming before. I want to be able to change to that very easily. And so that's where I think that the acquisition side needs to change a bit. And I think the other piece that I think the government needs to look at is it's hard. They're not that different at a command line level. When you get into the various CSPs and you have a developer, there's a lot of commonality. And I think looking at it from that aspect, from a people process and a training thing, that there is a lot of commonality from some of the core services. And so how can they, rather than think about starting over with training, look to be a slight delta to what they already have?
We take a little different direction throughout this statement. Single cloud's a lot easier to secure than hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud's not going to be very secure.
I would say that the counter to that is a single cloud. You know exactly what to go attack and where it is, as opposed to not really understanding, providing the adversary with more things to worry about and not really letting them understand where the attack or defense might be coming from.
What do you think? How do you secure the hybrid cloud? Is it going to give DoD more security, give it more resiliency?
I believe so. And as you all are, aware, with the zero trust architecture that we're looking at, I really believe whether you're multi or a single cloud, it's going to be a lot more resilient, a lot more focused on, securing the data. So I think that sort of takes single, multi out of the question, although clearly as you multiply and have more to secure, it may be challenging. However, to the opposite, and you have diversity, so you're not attacking one cloud or single cloud. So I think the zero trust piece is going to change the game on that.
One of the areas that has come across from DoD is maybe a concern with multi-hybrid cloud is, you could argue it's very difficult now just to take all of the DoD data and operate it successfully with all the integration, the legacy equipment in a single cloud. Mm-hmm. How is hybrid cloud going to address that? And do you think in the end it makes it easier to address those issues, or is it going to add more complexity?
So I think for Oracle, we've always thought about, you secure the data. People don't want to steal your network diagram. They want your data, right? So our history is rooted in protecting the data. And when you look at what we think multi-cloud brings to the department, is that on an individual program case or an individual system case, it doesn't really increase the risk, and it provides a lot of benefits, right? Mm-hmm. And people have to it is a case-by-case basis about what's the best fit, and look at the use case and the mission, and figuring out on this piece, does cloud benefit or not? Is multiple cloud benefit or not? Or is it a system that is I'll say generic back office that it doesn't really matter? And so there's an analysis that has to be done.
I think that's a good point. Let me ask you about, there does need to probably be some analysis on what needs to move to the cloud, what might not need to the cloud. How is DoD looking at that?
So as he was speaking, I was thinking of, data analytics. Data is going to be the core of our mission set and asset going forward. Data-driven decision means really, to Bob's point, that we need to have analytics and automation capabilities that enable us to do those things. And software is where that comes into play, modern software practices. And I know that you all are aware of the DoD software modernization, and which we're working the implementation plan currently. Actually, it's going through coordination, so hopefully pretty soon we'd be expecting the implementation. But that's where a lot of our efforts are going to be going into, is really focusing on the data and making sense of the data, and delivering the proper information, at speed and secure and at scale. So I think automation, data analytics, and CDAO, as you know, is the new organization under Dr. Martell, the deputy instituted very recently. All of these are the efforts that are ongoing because it is that critical to the entire effort of cloud and digital modernization.
Data is king. That is what we're all talking about. How do you get data to enable better decision-making, and great emphasis now on how do you get that data to the commanders for decision-making. We've talked about a lot of DoD data sets in legacy environments. So I'll just put out the conversation. So all the data should go to the cloud.
I don't know that I would agree with that, right? I think that the cloud has its use, right, for developing and testing and rapid agile development. It's a perfect use case. There are those instances that something's going to be I'll say a 24/7 honking workload that you may want to keep on premise because it would cost too much to run in a cloud. And so each has its advantages. So I think that's to your hybrid point. There are things that are going to remain on premise because they are much more cost effective and secure in that manner. But in developing that system and maintaining that system, I think cloud plays into how you get there.
Everything go to the cloud?
No, I couldn't agree more with Bob. Really, I don't have much to add to that because honestly, to even kid ourselves that we will move everything to the cloud is really, it's not going to happen and not anytime soon. So really to the point of the hybrid cloud is imperative to ensure that we maintain continuity as we innovate and modernize.
DoD has its own culture. You might argue that it's not a culture, and you have kind of said that it maybe doesn't accept change as well as other places. It's a hard culture to change. What is DoD going to need to do to help accelerate this type of change to this environment? How do you train this change?
Honestly, I think just the nature of how the world is evolving, how the threat is evolving, even things like the pandemic, COVID, there's forcing functions that are forcing us to change. And I don't want to call it force in that way, but by nature of how the world and our environment and the threat is evolving, I think it is really sort of giving us a little nudge to change. And I really honestly see that change and just that air within the department now and the way we operate. And it is a big organization. So to change such a big organization like that, just like that, is not going to happen. However, like I said, we've shown resilience in the midst of COVID, where this big department that everyone thinks, we always operate in secret and everything, but we made it work. No planes have fallen off the sky. No missions have been dropped. In fact, we've faced more adversity in this time than at any other time. And yet, here we are. So I really believe change will come. It maybe seems slow in some aspects, but I really believe change will come and is really happening.
I think you had to go. I think COVID did set an environment. I mean, it had to go to a distributed environment much faster than the plans were on the books to do that.
That's right.
So that has put maybe a better environment to say change can happen.
Absolutely.
Now, industry, of course, we have never any problems with change. We're always ready to change, ready to move forward to drop of a hat. Is industry, what do they have to look at to change in
So I
this
think you have to look at the workforce itself is changing, right? We have people come out of college who have been taught a different way. It's not that you remember the information. It's you know how to go find the information and how to apply the information, right? So the workforce is changing over time, and it's driving change in companies that like ours, where you have the innovation and they don't. People will question, why do we do something this way when there's a faster or better way to do it? And I think that also resonates into the department, where its workforce is going to demand the change and the evolution on a faster scale.
Okay, you guys have done great so far. That was the easy part. So now we got to give everybody their money's worth and let them ask us questions.
Terrific discussion so far. Thank you to all of you. And I encourage our in-person audience, let me know if you have a question. We'd love to get to you. But we did have a great question come in on our Zoom webinar, and I think this is mostly for Ms. Zeleke. But someone had said, connected IT systems and government cloud enable other tools with broader mission benefits. Could you comment on efforts to better integrate test systems into the branch's digital infrastructure, which could provide deeper insights into equipment performance and possibly failure analysis, and allowing engineers remotely to identify and troubleshoot problems before they impact readiness? Just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
That's definitely a mouthful.
It is.
And a long question, but I think what that's getting at is whether it's zero trust or the ability to sort of make our networks efficient, we're realizing that we really have to have more monitoring, real-time monitoring, sort of visibility at all times. In the way we operate and we look at our networks. So I think it gets to that point that the department recognizes that is actually one of the subjects that is widely discussed and even being considered in sort of the resourcing areas. So absolutely, it is an imperative that we have eyes on our networks at all times, and monitoring is a critical piece of it. And to be able to sort of communicate that information, whether it's test or any other capability.
Lee, I would add to that, I think some of the policies that I know you were involved in, that John Sherman has signed up recently about allowing the cyber ranges to be used by industry.
That's a great
in some cases,
example.
it actually tests the equipment early, lets everybody see it, shares the data. And I think from talking with you and John, they'll be expanded on that too.
Absolutely.
Sure. And then just to kind of tie back to our earlier keynote to kick us off today, we had heard from Red Hat CTO Chris Wright. He talked about the challenge of creating operationally resilient systems and what Red Hat's doing. And I just wanted to give that question to both of our panelists here. As you look at creating an operationally resilient system on hybrid or multi-cloud infrastructure, what are some of the key things that stick out in your mind that we need to be thinking about, whether we're in government or in the industry side?
Oh, I'll take that just because it is, well, I'll start. Just because it's part of our software modernization implementation plan is really enhancing the way we do software development, modern software development, DevSecOps. I think everybody hears that. But the ability to sort of make that process, the development, the security, and the operation piece integrated and sort of making it seamless. We're not there, but I think we've made huge strides in that area that I really believe that is the next level that's going to propel us to really make that sort of a norm versus, pockets as we have it right now.
So we've seen customers, we have a VMware service in the cloud that lets customers provision a virtual data center in our cloud. And so they get a COOP site for just provisioning the cloud connected to it. It's very simple for them to do. And so we've seen a number of commercial customers get to high resiliency that way and provide a DR site where they may not have had it before. And so that's been very successful for us.
Sure. And that's all the questions from me. So Mr. Halvorsen, I'll turn it back to you for your final thoughts from yourself and your panelists.
Any questions from the room before we close this out? Make sure everybody gets an opportunity to get their dollar out of this.
I have a question, Chris Wright, Red Hat. To Bob's point, I've seen great use of sort of high side, low side, so do work in the cloud, maybe targeted data export so you can ensure that it's securely exported to the cloud. I can also imagine where, from a DoD point of view, the actual edge is a really important space, and but then it's within your control. In the public cloud side, where do you see confidential computing enabling a new form of security that sort of takes zero trust and takes it a step further as being a credible way to provide public cloud access, even in a high side environment or something like that? I don't know if you're giving that much thought, but I'm curious where your head is there.
Honestly speaking, That is one of the areas we give much thought, but we're still at the early stages of trying to figure out the, sovereign tactical edge piece in a way that makes sense. So I think it'll be premature for me to sort of comment on moving to the public domain and sort of going at that from a service aspect. But ultimately, I think we will get there. We just have to figure out, a lot of it is probably not technical. So we just have to figure out how to get there.
I would add, having just come from the recent warfighter talks, it is a key component with all of the co-coms.
Yeah.
How are they going to take, and they've knocked it down a level to, they want to take commercial and public sensor data and pull that in real time for mission. And that is going to be a challenge. Confidential compute, though, probably is part of the answer to that equation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just going to thank the panelists. I applaud DoD's efforts to move to a hybrid cloud. I think that makes sense, multi-cloud. Industry has done, I think, well to step up and have lots more discussions about how industry works together, reduces some of the cost, and produces a better mission environment. So I think that's all goodness. I think we're making some great strides to doing that. I'll ask either panelists anything you want to add before we close out.
No, just thank everybody for their time and attention today.
Thank you very much for being here on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. We really appreciate having perspective from Department of Defense here. And I think one of the key messages from today's symposium is just the need to all work together as we start to advance in these cloud environments. So hopefully that's a great takeaway for everyone here today, as well as our virtual audience. And I do want to remind folks here, we do have a reception. It just started at the other end of the hallway, so please stick around and join us if you can. And again, I just want to acknowledge our industry partners, Dell Technologies, Intel, Oracle, and Red Hat. And please stay tuned for more great events from HSDF, including our regular series of roundtable discussions, as well as our larger symposiums. And coming up next, we are hosting our Artificial Intelligence Symposium on October 28th, hopefully with participation from DoD as well as DHS. So we hope to see you there. And just thank you again. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Today's program was produced by the Homeland Security and Defense Forum and made possible by the support of our partners Dell Technologies, Oracle, AT&T, Red Hat, and Intel. Video of today's show and other HSDF original programs can be found on the HSDF YouTube channel. Subscribe today and enjoy hours of insightful policy discussions. Stay tuned for information on additional HSDF programs in 2022, including the HSDF Artificial Intelligence Machine Learning Symposium in October and the Border Security Symposium in December. For more information, visit www.hsdf.org.